Chapter 19. 1. Luring the grub, his gaze subconsciously looked to the side, where there was a half-body's length mirror. A tall and straight-backed figure was reflected in it, the head of hip-length hair exceptionally striking, silvery white almost like snow. At many a time, he was unable to differentiate whether he was in his dreams or reality. And this person before him, even after so long, still felt so unfamiliar. After Little You died, he had followed her last wishes to sneak her outside. Unfortunately, that maniac of a man had cruelly not even wanted to spare her dead body. Just as he was escaping from that devil's nest with Little You's body, he was discovered. That man ordered the assassins under him to injure him heavily, and the man even went on to tear up Little You's wedding gown before his eyes. The girl's eyes were closed, her expression peaceful, so gentle and beautiful that she looked like a sleeping beauty. She would never wake up anymore, never to move again, and wasn't able to retaliate. The girl whom he saw as a goddess was made to suffer such humiliation even after her death. He was being held down by several people. But right at that moment, an insane thought suddenly came into his mind. He wanted to kill this man, to kill this demon who sought to taint Little You. A change seemed to come over his body at that moment, where the powers in him surged explosively. His black hair that was level with his ears suddenly grew long at an exponential speed, turning silvery white as snow as it spread out tyrannically, causing the assassins to release the grip on him subconsciously. He saw the fear in the man's eyes, but a pity it was already too late. The one and only thought in his head was to tear him up to shreds. He wanted the world to be covered in blood, to let the world that caused the girl's death to never ever see the light of day again. He embarked on a berserk massacre, and after that, he had suddenly found himself here in this strange world. The only thing he knew was that this was a world completely different from the one he had been in, but there were similarities as well. The people here cultivate themselves as well, and the spirit energy here seemed to be denser, where cultivation progress was a lot faster than the previous world. He had fallen into a deep sleep this time because he had reached the bottleneck of another level's peak, where the power became uncontrollable, and going into deep sleep would allow him to slowly absorb that power. Now his entire body was feeling incredibly relaxed, and just what kind of a level he had attained was something he did not know himself, as the way he cultivated was completely different from the people here after all. If Little You was still around, she would surely know. Little You? Qing Yili could not help but mutter softly, and his eyes suddenly narrowed as an audacious thought came into his mind. Could Little You possibly still be alive? Since he was still alive, then she who had already reached the half-divine realm could not possibly have fallen just like that. That's right, this must be the case. For a person who was so kind-hearted, she should not disappear just like that. Maybe she might have come to this strange lands just like him as well. Qing Yili took a deep breath, and his long, slender hand stretched out, a silvery white pearl suddenly appearing in his hand. Nah, this is for you. What is it? It contains a sliver of my consciousness in there. If a day comes that you cannot find me, or you encounter danger, crush it and I will be able to sense it. That bit of consciousness had been entrusted to him for so many years, and he could never bear to use the pearl. But now, he could only depend on it to find Little You. I am fine. I hope that everything is great for you as well. Qing Yili closed his eyes, and without any more hesitation, he clenched his fist and crushed the pearl in his palm. Hopefully, it was not too late. Ugh! The girl, who was completely focused on her elixir refinement, suddenly felt a stab of stinging pain in between her brows. Chapter 19. 2. Luring the grub, seeing the elixir that was about to be successfully cultivated suddenly about to be ruined, she quickly bit down on the tip of her tongue and pushed another sliver of her mental power into it, just managing to save the elixir. She then carefully kept the elixir in a specially crafted porcelain bottle before she heaved a sigh of relief. What just happened there? Qing Yu muttered as she massaged her temples. That had touched her right in the core of her spirit, a feeling that had been so intimate and familiar. Don't tell me. Impossible, that's not possible. I must be mistaken. Qing Yu laughed as she shook her head to herself. She still had to resolve that troublesome problem today, to repay the debt she owed, and she didn't have the time to think too much about it. Gathered clouds loft. Young Young Master Qing, what are you doing? Bai Jiyan stared in open-mouthed surprise as the handsome-looking youth very skillfully plucked the clothes off the man lying on the bed in just a few moves, and the lad was just about to extend his demonic claws upon the man's pants. He quickly moved to stop the lad. Why must you remove the clothes? Why was he the one feeling awkward instead when he asked those words? The lad's face was one of complete calm. His good-looking brow was raised up and he asked, "How am I going to find the grub's exact location if I do not take off his clothes? Must all the clothes be taken off?" Bai Jiyan's face had flushed a deep red, and it was a good while before he found his voice. "No need," Qingyu replied indifferently, and she went on to take off the pants on the outside, leaving the teensy-tight little pair of shorts inside on him. Bai Jiyan then blew out a long breath in relief. "It's all right. It's still all right." If the demonic god knew that he had allowed people to pluck all his clothes off when he woke up, the Lord would surely have him killed. Qing Yu's gaze did not turn away as it swept over the man's perfectly sculpted body, only coming to a stop right below the navel. There was a little creature the size of a fist sleeping comfortably there and snoring away, its body occasionally twitching slightly. She pulled out an exquisitely crafted bottle out from her sleeve and pulled out the stopper. A refreshing fragrance immediately wafted out, the scent causing people to be slightly taken aback. Bai Jiyan's eyes widened in shock, and he then began to look at that little porcelain bottle, his face seemingly a little pained. Such a supreme great elixir, and they were really going to feed it to that despicable little worm? That's really infuriating. The scent the elixir was giving out could not possibly be ignored, and it was just too tempting. Even the ice and fire yin-yang grub, which was soundly asleep, twitched in its state of unconsciousness, its closed eyes beginning to swivel around in search for the source of the smell. Suddenly getting excited and agitated, it could not help but to spread torment onto its host. Lu Junyao's brows knitted up tightly despite being in his unconscious state, the color of his complexion turning an ugly shade. The next second, Bai Jiyan was horrified when he saw that a slight protrusion at the lower abdomen started to move around, and he could hear a series of sounds that sound like the growl of a stomach when hungry going goo-doo, goo-doo, a highly terrifying sound. Qingyu narrowed her eyes and the corners of her lips curled up. She held the essence elixir between her fingers and held it up in the air right over the spot the grub was squirming. With the scent now closer, the worm was growing impatient. What was originally just a small protrusion started to swell up, to become a little bump. This is the moment. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu moved her hand forward a little, and then smacked it down hard right onto that bump. A little figure then broke out through the flesh of its host's body, lurching ferociously straight at Qingyu. At the moment just before it got too close to Qingyu, its entire body was suddenly caught and held under a powerful force, feeling like it was being crushed under a huge mountain as it fell heavily onto the ground, unable to climb to its feet at all. Qingyu did not pay it any attention after that, but went on to stuff that elixir straight into Lu Junyao's mouth. The elixir immediately melted in his mouth, and it was swallowed down his throat. "Damn you, human! That is mine." Chapter 20. 1. Little grub that's a beauty fanatic. That voice had a clear raspiness to it, a little stinging and harsh on the ears. And that sound had come out from that fleshy-looking grub that was now unable to move in the slightest. The grub's cultivation must have let it evolve into an evil spirit. It can actually talk? Bai Jiyan knew that the worm no longer posed to be a threat, and he was crouched down in a squat, looking at it appraisingly. Its body was about the size of a baby's fist, rotund in shape, with two antennae on its head, its body in alternating colors of blue and red. Its eyes were gray, and they looked a little malevolent. "Heh, it looks really ugly," Bai Jiyan surmised. "You're the ugly one. Your whole family's ugly." The ice and fire yin-yang grub retorted angrily. Of course it knew that it was not great looking, and that was why it would only choose people with outstanding looks to be its host. It had an inferiority complex and was highly irritable, detesting people who said it was ugly the most. If not for the fact that it was not able to move right at that moment, then it would surely have wanted to kill that foul-mouthed man. Qingyu observed the man lying on the bed carefully for a while. After ascertaining that there was no other symptoms that presented a threat to his life, she then slowly turned herself around to look down at that little grub who was exchanging glares with Bai Yin. It looked utterly disgusting, and Qingyu was getting an uncomfortable feeling in her stomach, the expression on her face turning cold. The grub worm that had still been rambling on with curses suddenly froze and stared in a daze at the dazzling white-clothed youth. It was impossible to tell whether those exquisite facial features were male or female, but they were imbued with a kind of gentleness that was more beautiful than what most youths possessed, and without the willful recklessness of young girls, with a sort of heavenly indolence. His eyes were tinged with a bit of iciness and a noticeable amount of disgust, but none of that reduced any of his good looks. The ice and fire in young grub had lived for more than 100 years, and it had never seen a person with such flawless looks. He was in fact more beautiful looking than all the handsome men it had ever seen put together. At that moment, its eyes were filled with surprise and joy, completely disregarding the fact that it was currently trapped, and it was all caused by that very same youth. Qingyu saw the way the worm was staring at her, and she became even more impatient. She pulled out another wooden bottle and then put the bug into it. That little fellow was completely immersed in her beauty, and it did not put up any resistance as it was being put into the bottle. It was only after it was trapped in that sealed space that it was finally able to react, struggling and roaring out in violent rage. Qingyu closed her palm over the bottle and sent a bolt of spirit power to strike inside the bottle. The grub worm immediately quietened down, having been knocked unconscious by that surge of power that had struck so abruptly. She tossed the bottle to Bai Yin, and he caught it instinctively. He then asked, feeling rather confused, "Why have you given it to me for?" In the end, all he got was a roll of the lad's eyes as he said, "You don't really think that your lord is fine just by getting that worm out of him, are you? Isn't that the case?" The ice and fire in young grub is one that is ranked highly among voodoo grubs used in ancient witchcraft. If not for the fact that I had a certain understanding about them from before, I would not have been able to get it out so easily. That worm has stayed in your lord's body for too long a period of time, and I think it has consumed quite a bit of your lord's essence energy. You will need to refine that grub within the span of 3 days, and extract the crystal out of its brain for your lord to absorb to root out his condition completely. I see. Bai Yin nodded, but then suddenly seemed to have thought of something. Why do you not do the refinement yourself? Things have already come to such a late stage. Why not see the treatment all the way through to its end? I don't want. Qingyu crinkled up her nose in contempt. That thing is too disgusting. Bai Yin was speechless, but could not help laughing. At that moment, the lad was acting very much like a little kid. Chapter 22. Little grub that's a beauty fanatic. In the midst of their conversation, it was not known when the man lying on the bed had quietly opened his eyes, the pair of violet eyes more brilliant than before. Where there had always been a layer of haze over those eyes, they were now clear and pristine, like the purest and most natural of purple crystal. Qingyu was stunned for a moment, seemingly mesmerized by that pair of eyes that were so flawlessly in their beauty, where she then gave a faint smile with a slight curl of her lips and said, "Looks like you are fine now." Lu Junyao's eyes were blank for a few seconds, but they recovered very quickly. There was something that changed in his body, and he felt different, a kind of comfortable easiness, except for a almost imperceptible chilliness. His gaze then subconsciously looked down at his body, and the color on his face immediately darkened visibly. His teeth gritted together as he called out, "Bai Yin." Bai Yin had served under him for so many years after all, and he must have understood the Lord's temperament the best. At almost the very same moment his voice fell, Bai Yin moved in the very next second to pull the thin blanket at the side to cover his lord up well and fully. That was no joke. That fellow Lu Junyao was not only a clean freak, but the extent of his paranoia towards certain things were just indescribable, you know? One did not have to mention placing him in an almost complete state of nakedness, and for him to be seen by others like that, just how big of a face-losing act that would be to him. It was thought that if this was not done only to save him, that fellow would not have hesitated in the slightest as he struck him dead with a single palm strike. The two men before her had one raging with fury, and the other smiling awkwardly as Qingyu then slowly regained her senses. That particular person's irregular actions earlier had her feeling rather bamboozled, and it was a moment later that she tossed out a statement indifferently. Are you feeling shy? What did you say? Lu Junyao's eyes dimmed, his malevolent gaze sweeping over to the nonchalant and languid youth leaning against the wall. Seeing the situation, Bai Ziyin blocked off his line of sight. My lord, it was young Master Qing who saved you. Just how powerful the Lord's pair of eyes were was something he had tasted before himself. If in a moment of carelessness the Lord came to hurt the lad, wouldn't that make the Lord an ingrate who forgets kindness rendered to him? Seeing that there was no reaction, Bai Ziyin then said, My lord, young Master Qing is really very skilled. Your body was not afflicted with the ice and fire poison, but it was all brought about by a grub that resided in your body. Lu Junyao's eyes narrowed. Grub? Even in the cloud heaven, a voodoo grub was something that everyone feared, exceptionally rare and mystical kind of existence. Usually, only in the big family clans would they keep a hidden trump card or two, and that would be grub breeders. These breeders were born from people using the grubs against their enemies or to gain control over others. The grub breeders lived perpetually in darkness, among thousands and thousands of grub worms, highly terrifying people. Lu Junyao had never liked to have any dealings with these dark and sinister people. Although he could really be considered to be a good person himself, but with something that was so horrendously evil, once one was tainted, one would be consigned to inextricable damnation. That was something he knew clearly in his heart. And now, he was being told that the thing that had tormented him for so long was not poison, but a terrifyingly evil voodoo grub. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. What made it even more unbelievable was that no one had been able to survive after being caught under the ravages of a voodoo grub, while he had miraculously survived for such a long time. Even for one as powerful as he was, could not help but feel fear lingering within. You don't need to worry about it as it has already been extracted. You are lucky that you met me. By looking at his expression, Qingyu already knew what he was thinking. She then pointed at Bai Ziyan's hand and said, It's in there. You will only need to have it refined, and you will recover fully. You will also gain quite significantly from this, as your cultivation will increase greatly. A thing like the ice and fiery Yang grub was not without its advantages, as it would at least be able to bolster one's speed and cultivation progress, where what could be achieved in a day would equal what would take others half a month. Chapter 21. 1. Golden red elixir flames, thank you. Lu Junyao restrained his emotions and nodded his head slightly. You have saved me, and I will remember this as a debt I owe you. Qingyu could not help but laugh. Shouldn't I be the one who owes you a favor? After all, I took your polar fire core. That is a completely separate matter. The debt owed for having saved my life is not what a mere bunch of herb can offset. Lu Junyao was in a great mood, as the smile at the corners of his lips deepened slightly. I had been bogged by this for many years, which had greatly wrecked my body. If my body is ravaged for another few years by it, it will not be long before I will lose my life. Qingyu's lips unconsciously curled up. It will be all right. I will prescribe some medicine for you in a while. Your body's constitution is rather good, and you will slowly recover. It was clear with just one glance that the man's identity was anything but ordinary, and his heart must be proud and arrogant, where the things he would not be able to accept would be to see that something was wrong with his own body. The elegant, white-clothed, handsome lad already looked exceptionally exquisite when he did not smile, and when a faint smile hung on his lips, it was like the sun had lit up the entire dim and dark room. Lu Junyao smiled. For that, I would have to trouble you. Bai Ziyin looked at the two people from the side, seeing them exchange pleasant, courteous words alternatively, and the expression on his face became a little strange. My lord, has the poison not been purged completely? This manner of speech isn't like you at all, you know? His personality was one of, great as the heavens and earth are, I am the greatest, wildly arrogant, never knowing what courtesy was in the slightest. So there was no need to even mention him knowing how to beat around the bush in humble politeness. What could have possibly possessed him today? Could it be? His gaze then discreetly turned to peer at the lad's face of unmatched beauty and allure. Could the reason be because the lad is so good-looking? I wonder from where the young master received tutelage. Seeing that you are still so young but your attainment in the field of medicine has already reached the realm of alchemists whose age have reached past half a century, I would think that your teacher must surely be a person of extraordinary significance. Lu Junyao went on in a roundabout manner, before he finally spoke what was really on his mind. This lad had some great moves, possessed great skills in medicine, and even held knowledge about witchcraft. With such a great talent, wouldn't he be recklessly wasting a gift from heaven if he did not rope the lad in over to his side? Qing Yu laughed helplessly and said, I belong to no sect or clan. My skills acquired through self-study. These two master and servant pair are rather quaint. Both of them asking the same things one after another. Have alchemists really become such a rare existence in this world? And that's why they were trying so hard to win over the power behind her after just seeing she was skilled in medicine. Very unfortunately, she really did not have any powerful sects or clans. It was through one single chance encounter that I inherited knowledge in medicine that allowed me this small accomplishment, and I did not have a master. When she said it the last time, Bai Jiyin had looked half dubious and she thought she might as well make it clear this time. Lu Junyao raised an eyebrow slightly. The lad did not look like he was lying. But wasn't his luck a little too good? To be able to inherit those skills in medicine, that was something that all alchemists would hope to get their entire lives. And there was one more thing that he was still a little curious about. Then, I wonder at what grade of alchemy are you at now? His level shouldn't be too low. That was also something Bai Jiyin was curious about. He had not been able to decipher the lad's cultivation nor his grade as an alchemist. If the grade did not far surpass his, it would then mean that the lad had employed some special method to conceal it. Once that question was asked, Qing Yu was first taken aback a moment, before she blinked her eyes and then went on to ask, Grade? How are they gauged? The air grew heavy for a moment. Was this kid making a joke out of all this? Could it be that he was not from this world and that was why he did not even know what levels and grades were? Chapter 21. 2. Golden red elixir flames. Bai Jiyin coughed twice to lend relief to the awkward atmosphere. Young Master Qing, air, doesn't seem to understand it all that well. It works like this. As every single person possesses a different level of gift, so at the moment of birth, infants undergo a test to ascertain how gifted they are. Some people possess prodigious gift in the area of alchemy, while some others would be more gifted in martial cultivation. Regardless whether it is in alchemy or martial prowess, they are differentiated into high and low grades. Like for alchemists, for example, their grades are gold, silver, bronze, and above that would be platinum, white silver, and green bronze. The bronze grade is the lowest level, and they need to rely on beast fire, or its equivalent as a source of fire when they practice alchemy. When one attains the silver level, they would then be able to slowly garner their own elixir fire. After that explanation, Qing Yu was finally able to understand. So that was how the grading of alchemists worked in this world. Then, what grade are you at already? Qing Yu asked as she looked at the man in front of her. She knew that the man was an alchemist. Bai Jiyin smiled and a highly intense silver flame suddenly sprouted from his fingertip. I have just advanced into white silver. Then you would consider to be a very great alchemist already, Qing Yu said as she nodded her head. Young Master Qing's proficiency in medicine is at a much higher level than mine, and I think you must already be at the platinum grade. The smile on Bai Jiyan's face suddenly congealed. The blinding, flickering red flame caused him to be stunned for a moment. Is that what platinum grade fire looks like? But based on what you said earlier, it should be golden in color. Qing Yu said in puzzlement as she looked at the little golden red flame on her fingertip. That fire had been with her all the way since her previous life, and it had gained spirit consciousness. Having released it out like this, it was like a child who had been locked up for a long time, highly active and lively, moving around on her hand, and even bouncing a time or two intermittently. Bai Jiyin was shocked beyond words, and he was unable to speak at all at that moment. Could that elixir fire possibly have gained its own spirit consciousness? Although Lu Junyao was not an alchemist, but he had seen Bai Jiyin cultivate and refine medicines so many times. His elixir fire was not so lively, and the color in this one was really rarely seen. Seeing that he had been able to tell, Qing Yu did not try to conceal it. That's right. This little fella has been with me for a very long time and is capable of human emotions. As she had thought, she shouldn't have let it come out. That playful little fire source was twirling around her fingers in circles, from one finger onto the next, zipping around happily. It went on for a while, and it must have sensed that its mistress was getting a little impatient before it showed some restraint, coming to a stop on her palm and did not move anymore. Bai Jiyan looked like he had been dealt a devastating blow as his face turned sorrowful and highly despondent. It's really so infuriating to be compared with other people. He was after all well and proper recognized as the most gifted prodigy among the divine healers sect, but when compared to this young lad, he paled in comparison completely. Lu Junyao's gaze grew deep as it darkened. Is young Master Qing also from the cloud heaven? It was the second time she had heard that unfamiliar name. Qing Yu cast a glance at Bai Jiyan. The first time had been him asking her the same thing. I do not know what this cloud heaven both of you have spoken of really is. I only know that this is the Green Wave Kingdom and I grew up here in this place. This place is only one among low-grade lands. Seeing that the lad really did not know it, Lu Junyao still explained it patiently to him. The place you are in is called the Jade Pearl Continent, where martial cultivation is seen to be slightly more inadequate. The continent is split up 3 ways, into the Green Wave, Water Edge, and Martial Blue, 3 kingdoms. Above this place is the White Marsh Continent, medium-grade lands, where the cultivation of any regular person there is equivalent to a powerful pugilist here. And another level higher up will be the Cloud Heaven. Qing Yu nodded her head and immediately arched an eyebrow up. Seems like you people are people from Cloud Heaven? Chapter 21. 3. Golden red elixir flames, that's right. To have crossed over 2 continents at once, it must have drained your cultivation quite a bit. Are you people running away from enemy persecution? Qing Yu asked as she rubbed her chin thoughtfully. It can be considered to be that. Lu Junyao smiled. With my body becoming weaker by the day, encountering an enemy would only mean being slaughtered. In that case, wouldn't hiding far, far away from them be the smarter thing to do? Being adaptable is definitely a virtue. Bai Jiyan was speechless. Only mean being slaughtered. Aren't you taking it too far with pretending to be weak and helpless? And you're saying it with such a serious face, almost deceiving me as well. But Bai Jiyan's surveying eyes then came back onto the 2 people who were chatting away happily, and he came to a conclusion. Lu Junyao was indeed showing a fondness for that lad, as he had never seen his lord ever being so chatty. In another part of the capital city, Yin Ningluo and Yin Shicheng had a fight, and they parted on an unhappy note. All the way from when they were very young, Yin Shicheng had always doted on her very much, never once raising his voice at her. And this time, just because of a completely unrelated person, he had actually scolded her. In a fit of anger, Yin Ningluo then decided not to return home. Although she did not come back to the imperial capital much, but she still had several fast and steady friends, and the left prime minister's youngest daughter was one that she was usually closest to. Among the famous women in the imperial capital, besides Yin Ningluo being hailed as the greatest beauty, Yu Xiaoning was also well known to be a lady who was both talented and beautiful. Known as the imperial city's dual pride together as Yin Ningluo, Su Xiaoning had a fair and tiny almond-shaped face, her sharp chin tinged with a faint line of beauty's cleft which was exceptionally enchanting. Her quick-witted limpid pair of sparkling eyes seemed to talk, a highly intelligent and graceful young lady. At that moment, her dainty cherry lips were slightly curled up, amused as she looked at her gloomy and unhappy good friend. Who could have angered our greatest beauty now? What audacity! Tell me, and I will vent your frustration onto them for you. Yin Ningluo rolled her eyes at her friend. And you're still teasing me? When did I do that? Am I not showing concern here? Su Xiaoning covered her mouth and laughed lightly. Aya, don't be so unhappy. It's not often we can meet and reminisce of old times. With you becoming the faint mist sect's greatest female senior, I am finding it harder and harder to keep up with you. Yin Ningluo scoffed at her. Here you are squeezing out sourness to make vinegar again. How am I as capable as you? Our entire Green Wave country will have to depend on you. Although the left prime minister was a weak and frail literary official, but his children had all done well for themselves. This one here was his youngest daughter, a prodigy genius born to do business and trade. A good half of the Green Wave Kingdom's industries were all Yu Xiaoning's, and it could be said that she controlled the kingdom's economic lifeline. So beautiful and was able to make so much money. Only the heavens knew how many young men were harboring some ideas towards her. I have heard that the Water Edge Kingdom is going to send a princess here to propose a match in marriage. Yu Xiaoning stopped fooling around and started to speak of serious business. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU marriage proposal? It's just a cover, sheer camouflage. Yin-Ning Luo answered with a sneer. The one coming here is not any princess, but the Water Edge Kingdom's most favored ninth princess, Xian Yin. Would you Mu Qian, who is so crazily protective of that sister of his, really marry her off to an enemy kingdom? Only when the sun rises up from the west. Yu Xiaoning rubbed her chin. That's quite true. But then, what are they coming here for? Could it be that because the kingdoms were at peace and they were feeling idle, so they are thinking to start a war? You are so busy making money all the time, and I think you are not aware that that demonic Duke of Vast Seas has awoken, and he will be the one escorting you Xian Yin here? That can't be true. The smile at the corners of Yu Xiaoning's lips then showed a rare moment of stiffening. Chapter 22. 1. Unlucky, unlucky, really unlucky. Would they really be that unlucky? She still remembered back when she had opened her first restaurant. It was destroyed by the Duke of Vast Seas. The losses she incurred back at that time had almost made her life not worth living at all. Because the restaurant had been rather large in scale, all the fixtures and fittings inside were all carefully and painfully created and put together by her. After she took so much effort to bring the business up to reach a peak, a war started between the Green Wave Kingdom and the Water Edge Kingdom. That god of slaughter had been vicious, quickly causing her to lose her restaurant completely. And what did he then say? A wasteful extravagance? Did she take his family's money to waste? That scoundrel. Thinking about it now still pained her quite a bit. Yin-Ning Luo had not thought so much about it as she nodded her head. I heard that they will come in another month's time, which would coincide with the Green Wave Kingdom's triennial All Saints Festival. Yu Xiaoning nodded in agreement. Looks like she would have to fully prepare her protection mechanisms in advance this time, in case that god of slaughter comes to tear up her territories when he's in a bad mood. Isn't that the crown prince? Why is he out? Through the half-covered window, a tall and slender figure in dark green slowly walked past, his face gentle and elegant, exceptionally outstanding looking. Hearing that, Yin-Ning Luo lifted her eyes to look, and then retracted her gaze, seemingly indifferent. Yu Xiaoning did not hear any response, and she turned her head back. Little Ning, aren't you going to go down and see the crown prince at all? There's no need for me to go see him. I see him often enough in the sect. TSK, don't try to deceive me. Don't I know you well enough? You must be trying to avoid him. Yu Xiaoning said, immediately exposing her. Yin-Ning Luo glared at her. What do you mean I'm avoiding him? Do you think he wants to see me so much? These birthday characters of these two must surely clash each other's. It was not known why they always seemed to dislike the sight of each other from a very young age. How are they going to get along when they get married in future? Yu Xiaoning held her hand over her forehead. She was really very worried for her. Duke of Eternal Peace Manor, Qing Yu returned back from outside, and she had just opened the door when she saw Qing Bei standing in the corner, his expression looking rather panicked. What's wrong? She asked as her eyebrow lifted. Sis. Seeing that she had come back, the youth then blew out a breath in relief. Father came here earlier, and he just stood outside the door for a very long time. It almost frightened me to death. Is that so? Qing Yu curled up her lips in a smile. Why are you so afraid of? You're afraid that he would see that you can actually stand on your feet? Qing Bei nodded, his voice soft. I was afraid that if Father saw it, it might spoil your plans. So foolish. Qing Yu stretched her hand out and rapped a knuckle on his head. So what if he sees it? What can happen? At most you can just tell him that you encountered an expert who treated your crippled legs for you. That would at least make him take note, and he might even pay a little attention to you. I do not care for all that. Qing Bei sneered. Did you go to the gathered cloud loft to treat that man's condition? I just gave him a body checkup and I did not find much problems. When he recovers, then I will have nothing to do with them anymore. Qingyu said with a smile. I'm going to rest. You better go carry on with your cultivation and don't be lazy. I've set up a barrier array outside and no one will disturb you. I know. Qingyu went back to her room and closed the door before she sat herself on the bed to gather her mind in meditation. The moment she closed her eyes, everything surrounding her seemed to blur, her body feeling light as a feather, like she had come to another world. This was her personal space dimension. She came to this place whenever she cultivates herself. The spirit energy in here was highly robust and dense, more than 100 times stronger than outside. When she had just returned here from outside, she noticed that something did not feel quite right in her body. There were faint signs of her about to achieve a breakthrough, and she had immediately rushed her way in here. Chapter 22. 2. Unlucky, unlucky, really unlucky. Back in her past life, she had already cultivated the buried soul arts to its pinnacle, and now that she was starting all over again, because she already had experienced it once before, she found it easier to grasp it when cultivating, yielding faster results. It was funny saying this. The Qing family in her previous life was the greatest reclusive family clan, hidden from the world, the embodiment of righteousness who helped the dying and healed the wounded, their heart encompassing the world. But the two secret treasures handed down from the ancestors, one of them being the buried, was clearly not any orthodox skill as it contained no lack of devilry techniques inside. The other, heavenly, was also not a precious compilation of medical books, as the legends claimed as half of its contents were about techniques with poisonous voodoo grubs. Heavenly, buried, it could be seen that the people had been deceived, as no one had ever seen those legendary secret treasures. But one thing was true. Within the burial soul arts, there was a powerful ancient magical artifact, where after undergoing many thousands and thousands of years of practice, it had developed a spirit consciousness. And at that moment, it was quietly lying there in a corner within Qingyu's space dimension. It was a gold and silver dual-colored snake-shaped circlet, and there were many complicated, ancient-looking designs on its surface. It remained there quietly, not moving at all. Qingyu rubbed a finger in between her brows and walked over to knock on the snake's head. The circlet quivered, and a blinding light emitted from it before it then slowly opened its eyes. Its pair of long and slender eyes were also dual-colored with gold and silver that looked very nice. Mistress? The little snake blinked its eyes, still a little groggy, before its mouth split into a smile. Mistress, you've become stronger again. Qingyu snorted a breath through her nose and asked, How long has it been for you already? And you're still not able to regain human shape. I am starting to have thoughts of abandoning you now. Wah. No. Don't, mistress. I am really trying my very hardest to restore my spirit body. The little snake wailed pitifully, its gold and silver eyes almost glistening with tears, a sight that tugged at one's heart. How are you feeling now? Qingyu suddenly asked out of the blue, and the little snake was not able to react for a moment. What? You are my weapon spirit. Do you not feel anything at all after I undergo a breakthrough? It then dawned upon the little snake as it swiveled its head a little, and its body swelled from just about the thickness of an adult's thumb up a few times. Huh, I grew bigger? The little snake's face filled up with surprise, twisting its body and shaking its tail. It then slithered up onto Qingyu's hand, to rub its head against the back of Qingyu's hand. Mistress, look, I've grown bigger. Ha ha ha. Imbecile, Qingyu said with a roll of her eyes. Having turned back into your original form must have brought your intelligence down to that of a retard as well. I am obviously very clever. In what way am I a retard? The little snake harumphed as it turned its head away in indignation. Qingyu stroked its cold body. I don't know what could possibly be holding you down. I think I'll refine a batch of elixirs that restores spirits for you in a while, or you would still be just a snake even when my hair has turned all white. Really? Thank you, mistress. The little snake had regressed a lot as she had thought. Upon hearing that there would be elixirs to eat, it immediately became so happy and it was rubbing itself against her hand like a little child. Qing Yu's eyes suddenly looked a little sad. That golden-haired youth who saw himself as unparalleled in the world had been so spirited and full of mettle. If not for her, he would surely still be living leisurely, enjoying a life free of worries. But now, it could not even maintain its most basic human form. "Mistress, are you unhappy again?" Although the little snake's mental intelligence was not entirely complete, but its emotional senses had become very sensitive. It had its tiny head lifted up as it stared at her earnestly with its long, slender eyes. "No, I'm not." Qing Yu could not help but smile as she shook her head. "You get yourself some good rest. I'll come see you again after some time, to give you the elixirs." I will, mistress." The little snake licked her finger, and then obediently leapt off her hand, to coil itself up into a circlet again, shrunk back in a corner quietly. Chapter 22. 3. Unlucky, unlucky, really unlucky. Qing Yu had just broken through, and her aura was still a little unstable. She stayed inside there for a little while more, before she retreated from there. She had only been in the spatial dimension for a while, but it had already become dark outside, and Qing Bei was already not in the room anymore. The youth had always had a mind of his own from a very young age, and towards Qing Bei's affairs, Qing Yu seldom interfered. The moon hung high up in the night sky, spilling down a cover of silvery white, unimaginably beautiful. The ends of Qing Yu's mouth were slightly lifted, her mood unconsciously great. She was about to go out for a stroll when a figure flitted speedily right across the night sky, that then suddenly plummeted downwards in a straight fall. And of all the many places there to fall into, the figure fell into the herbs beds that she had carefully tended, squashing a large portion of the plants flat. The smile froze on her lips, and the corners of her eyes sharpened as her footsteps halted. That figure had fallen without even letting out a grunt, but to continue lying there like a stiffened corpse. Qing Yu could finally no longer hold it in, and with a frozen, mirthless smile on her face, she said, "I'll say, fellow brother, get up already. How long do you intend to lie there?" There was no reaction. She lifted a foot and went walking over there, before kicking the figure a few times. She then saw that there was still no reaction, and that it did not look like the downed figure was pretending. Fainted. Qing Yu parted the person's messy hair and discovered that the face was filled with bruises blue and black, highly swollen, an unbearable sight. She stood there in silence for quite a while. Heck, just wait till someone discovers him tomorrow and takes him away. She didn't want to attract any trouble. She looked on in pain at the squashed bed of herbs. How unlucky. Aha, so there's an accomplice here. The eccentric-sounding voice then reached her. Qing Yu turned around and saw two people walking towards her, the bright weapons in their hands shining so bright they could blind someone. Hehehe, isn't she such a little beauty? Let the great lord hear. When that person came closer, he then realized that it was not mere little beauty, but a little petite goddess. She was just too beautiful. The corner of Qing Yu's mouth stiffened. Great mothers, what kind of a bloody bad luck is she in tonight? Is this person here the one you are pursuing? I'll have to trouble you to quickly bring him away and not dirty my place. Qing Yu opened her mouth to say smilingly. The two men were not exactly all that bad looking, but it was just that the expression on their faces were too vulgar that added a certain amount of evil treachery onto them. The beauty is right. That brat has tainted the beauty's eyes and is truly deserving of death. One of the men chuckled evilly. Wait till I have dealt with that brat, and I'll then come comfort the beauty. Help me. A weakened male voice came out from the man whose face had been beaten beyond recognition. He struggled hard to open his eyes, and a pair of eyes dark as night showed that he was valiantly enduring it. He had been poisoned, but he was still able to maintain consciousness at that moment, where his incredibly strong willpower could be seen. Qing Yu arched up an eyebrow and crouched down to take a look at him. But you've destroyed my herb bed, and I am very angry. What I mean with these words is that I can actually save you. But since you have committed such an unpardonable and cruel crime, I'm not in the mood to do it at all. I can compensate you. How? 1 million. Is that enough? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, do I look like I am short of money? Gold. All right. Deal. Qingyu nodded her head helplessly and then raised a hand to strike a major acupoint on his body to temporarily stop the poison in his body from spreading. The two men who had been smiling slyly then realized at that moment that this young lady before them was not just an ordinary beauty. Chapter 23. 1. A deterring show of power. They were now no longer in the mood to tease the beauty anymore as their hands tightened around their weapons. Little beauty, do not blame Big Brother for being callous, but you can only blame it on your unfortunate fate. Qingyu looked at the two men with their malevolent faces, and she shook her head sympathetically. Hayes, of all times to come here. You really know how to pick the time. All that she grew in her herb beds were not just herbs, but also several stalks of beautiful but savage lunar enamored flowers. They belonged to a similar species as the man-eating flower, but these flowers bloomed only at night, especially after they were bathed in the moon's essence. Their demonic nature greatly intensifies. She seldom had people coming to visit her courtyard, and she had planted them when she had nothing to do, and for them to guard the yard as well. And these two unfortunate miscreants had come seeking their own deaths, their hands holding such shiny weapons. The lunar enamored flowers loved moonlight, but they detested other kinds of light. Those two fools had been waving their weapons around for a while, and she guessed that the flowers were about to throw a fit. As expected, under the silence of night, something seemed to growing robustly under the ground. In moments, the soil in front of them loosened and surged, and several enormous dark shadows rose up, surrounding the two men. The enormous flowers were snowy white throughout, their mouths that were fully filled with sharp teeth all wide open, with a long and rounded red tongue sticking out which was densely covered in sharp hooks. As those horrifying mouths swayed, they blew out warm and wet breaths. What kind of a thing is this? The two men were staring with their eyes wide and their mouths agape in shock. Their bodies stiffened, and they don't even dare to move. Those are great things to have, you know. I will have to thank both of you for providing them with fertilizer. Qingyu said with a disarming smile. Do you know who we are? How dare? Arf! That person had not even finished his words when half of his body was chomped off by a lunar enamored flower with one single bite, the blood spraying all over the other man beside him, frightening him into howling out in sheer terror. In the next second, he was swallowed up by another lunar enamored flower. That flower seemed to have been very hungry for a long time, where it did not only swallow that man cleanly up, it even licked up the blood on the ground till there wasn't a single drop left. After it had its fill, it let out a satisfied burp and then buried itself back deep underground, leaving only its rhizome showing on the surface. The man lying on the ground gone on ahead to fall into a dead faint, having been unable to hold out against the poison in his body, and he did not see the scene that unfolded, or he might very well have half his life scared out of him. Qingyu creased up her brows and was met with a dilemma. This fellow was so tall and towering in size. Was she really going to drag him all the way into the house? If she dumped him there, it wouldn't be good that he would still be crushing her herbs and plants underneath him. Hey, wake up. Continue feigning death, and I will leave you here to your own perishment. She stuffed an antidote elixir into his mouth boorishly and stretched her hand out to jab her finger onto the swollen areas on his face 2 times. The man had been giddy and barely conscious throughout, but was feeling a little more awake after being fed the antidote elixir. When his face was jabbed by her, the pain caused him to grit his teeth and exclaim, You? Me? What about me? Qingyu asked as she stared down at him from her higher vantage point. Quickly get someone to bring you away from here and not continue to take up space here at my place. Also, do not forget that you owe me 1,000,000 taels of gold. Rest assured, I never go back on my word. Wait till I go back, and I'll have someone send the gold. The man said through tightly clenched teeth, in indignant anger. That will be best. You can carry on. I'm going back into sleep. She let out a lazy yawn, and then immediately went walking towards her own room without once turning her head back before she stepped inside. The man was a little stunned. The lady was leaving him in the lurch just like that? Can't she see that he was poisoned? Wait, it seems his body is not hurting anymore, and he wasn't feeling all that uncomfortable anymore. Chapter 23. 2. A deterring show of power that was when he remembered that he had seemingly just been fed with an elixir. What a strange woman. The man muttered to himself under his breath, and then stood up shakily from the ground, subconsciously seeing that he had squashed quite a large patch of the foliage with his body. The expression on his face showed a rare moment of embarrassment before he then leaped nimbly over the wall to leave. After achieving her breakthrough, Qingyu was feeling a lot more relaxed, and she slept throughout till the next morning before she awoke. She stretched lazily and then went to open up the window. The window looked out over the herb beds directly, and she was able to see it clearly. Qingyu blinked her eyes in surprise to see that the large patch of her herbs that had been ruined was now looking perfectly intact, restored to the way it was, showing no sign of having been flattened at all. What is going on here? Are her eyes seeing things bright and early in the morning? Ow! What is this thing? A muffled cry sounded outside. The youth who was covered in morning dew had just come back, and before he had even stepped in through the door, he had stubbed his toe into something hard, his eyes staring wide with shock. And what is this? Why is it placed here right in front of the door? What's wrong, little Bei? Qingyu asked from inside, coming over, and was about to open the room's door as she spoke. Bei quickly called out to stop her. Sis, don't open the door just yet. Thereafter, he then approached carefully, staring measuringly at the thing that was wrapped up in black cloth. He gave it a probing nudge with his foot, and then shifted its position a little away from the door. Qingyu heard the noises and then opened the door. What's wrong? Bei pointed at the black-wrapped package. I saw this thing at the door the moment I came back, and I do not know what it is, but I do not think it is anything dangerous inside. Qingyu arched up an eyebrow and looked at it, before she reached out and wanted to pick it up. I can move it? She exerted a bit more of her strength and was just able to lift it up. She opened it to take a look, and a brilliant blinding gold shone out from the neatly stacked gold bricks, each about the size of a palm. There was also a stack of banknotes where each note was no less than 10,000 taels. Bei's eyes narrowed up as he stared. There's so much money. There was also a letter within the bundle. Qingyu picked it up and tore off the seal, and saw several lines of flowing script. Here is 1,000,000 in gold. As I am currently only able to bring out 700,000 taels in physical gold, I have drawn out the balance 300,000 in the form of banknotes, without a penny less. The debt of having saved my life is engraved in my mind. For having carelessly damaged your garden, I am deeply sorry. I have ordered for the best workmen to restore the herb bed as much as possible, and I hope that can appease your anger. Qingyu curled up her lips. This fella is rather conscientious. To think that he had even repaired her herb bed. A single elixir in exchange for 1,000,000 in gold. It was a windfall no matter how one calculated. Truly a case of fools have abundant wealth. Sis, what is going on here? Bei had never seen so much money in all his life, and he did not know how to react at that moment. He had not come back for only one night, and what had actually happened? Qingyu smiled slyly and rubbed her chin. It's nothing. Last night, an unexpected windfall fell right into our courtyard. That's all. Really? Bei's face was filled with suspicion and doubt. Of course it's real. Why would I lie to you? With a click of her tongue, she wrapped the bundle back up, and the entire package then disappeared without a trace. The fact that she possessed her own dimensional space was something Bei knew, and hence he was not surprised. You're back so early? Qingyu's lips were curled up as she ruffled the dew-drenched hair of the youth, smiling as she spoke. Bei meekly remained in his position, allowing her to abuse the top of his head like she would a pet, the expression on his face soft and warm. Chapter 23. 3. A deterring show of power, sis. When I just came back earlier, I heard about a certain matter. Bei seemed to suddenly remember something funny, and the ends of his mouth lifted as he said, It seems like the Duchess is going to come out of seclusion. The Duchess? Qingyu blinked. Hasn't she lived in seclusion for so many years and does not ask about worldly affairs? For her to suddenly decide to jump back out, could it be a signal that more was at play? Because father told the chief steward yesterday that he wants to employ people to flatten and rebuild the tranquil abode as the age of the courtyard has become too old and has gotten dilapidated, making it unsafe for us to live in here. He intends to move us into the main lodge up front and live there. Qingbei then slowly told her about the news he had heard just last night. Qingyu was filled with delight when she heard that. Isn't that just appalling enough news to get the royal concubines and lady concubines jumping up in a fit? Of course it would. Seeing Qingyu gloating at others' misfortune, Qingbei could not help but laugh. But, based on that reason, she would definitely come to seek trouble with us here, but it's still so quiet. That's why I say the Duchess is coming out from seclusion. With the main chief having not spoken a word about it yet, how could the others possibly dare to play any tricks? Knock, knock, knock. While the two of them were chatting merrily, a series of knocks sounded from the outside of the door. Qingyu arched up an eyebrow and silently signaled for Qingbei to go inside the room before she went to open the door. She saw a pretty little lass dressed in maroon-colored clothes standing outside, the smiling eyes on her highly lovable. She first bowed respectfully and then said smilingly, "Sixth young miss, I am the Duchess' personal maid-in-waiting and my name is Yin Fei. The Duchess has ordered me to come extend an invitation to the sixth young miss and the second young master. Today is the Duchess' fulfillment of her vegetarian fast, and she has specially arranged for a banquet to be held, and all the young masters and young misses in the manor are invited to come for a meal." Qingyu smiled. "Thank you, miss, we know it now." Yin Fei was stood there frozen for a moment, seemingly not expecting to hear such a short and curt reply after she had said so much, and the usually glib-tongued little maid suddenly found herself at a loss for words. "Is there anything else?" Qingyu asked as she looked at her frozen in her spot, finding it a little amusing. Yin Fei snapped back to her senses. "There's nothing else." Yin Fei will then take her leave. Finishing what she came to say, she turned and left with hurried steps. What was that for? Qingbei stuck his head out from inside and asked, looking at the figure who had gone a good distance away. Qingyu pulled him inside the house. "The Duchess is holding a highly duplicitous banquet and has specially invited everyone to attend. I am guessing that she is seeking to make it a threatening show of the power she holds, to make us stay in line and not dare dream of doing anything impractical. Looks like the manner that father is treating us has gotten under her skin this time." Qingbei's eyes dimmed. "Vegetarian fast? Humph. It's just an excuse. That vicious woman will really follow the way of Buddha? Having committed so many evil deeds, it would be too good for her if she is not condemned into hell. If we do not go, then she might very well pin onto our heads the crime of showing contempt to the Duchess, and we will not be able to live in peace." Qingbei shook his head as he said with a bitter laugh, "Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. What you are saying sounds reasonable enough." Qingyu commented as she tapped the tip of her finger upon the table. "In that case, I shall then take the first step to make a deterring show of power first." She had always liked to make the first move, and was not used to allowing herself to suffer in a disadvantaged position. Hence, when high noon came, the inside of the main house was already filled with people seated inside. The two royal concubines were seated directly one seat down from the main seat on the left and right, followed by the 4 lady concubines according to rank and 3 other concubines, with the other 5 young misses of the Duke's manor at the end. Chapter 24. 1. Life's just a great big show everywhere. It was a straight flush of women. But the expressions on their faces were exceptionally interesting to see. There was doubt, surprise, and a series of complex emotions, but with the exception of joy. Everyone in the manor knew that the Duchess was no simple character. Although the outside world praised her to be a perfect and virtuous wife, gentle and generous, but only those who have really spent some time together with her knew that the woman was not as harmless as she seemed to be on the surface. Here they were seated for almost a good 2 hours already, and she still had not arrived. She had clearly been the one who sent people to come inform them of the time, and out of respect for her, they had all come a quarter of an hour earlier. But 2 hours have passed now, and there hadn't been a sign of her at all. But no one dared to harbor any complaint. The other party was not only the eternal Peace Duke's Manor's lady proper, she was also the only daughter of the highly ranked High General Amo, who served 2 generations of the reigning regime. With her illustrious identity placed prominently before her, it was enough to make everyone swallow back down any indignance most readily. After about another stick of incense as time has passed, the people then saw 2 figures come walking slowly in from outside. One of them was dressed in maroon, with pretty looks, the Duchess' most trusted personal aide, Yin Fei. She was holding the other person, who was formally dressed in beautiful and noble sapphire blue, her figure still slender and her skin fair and smooth, looking rather young and pretty, though she was a woman close to 40. She had maintained herself to look like a young lady who had just gotten married, still fully able to capture people's hearts. Looks like in the past years that she shut herself in seclusion, she had not only been keeping to a vegetarian fast. All the ladies' hearts were filled with all kinds of jealous envy and hatred, but none of them dared to display a lack of etiquette, with everyone standing up to greet. Our respects to the Duchess. Imo Hanyin stepped in slowly to walk over to the main seat. After she sat down, she then opened her mouth to say without emotion, "Have a seat." "Thank you, Duchess." "The Duchess, I am not feeling too well, and as I've been keeping to a vegetarian fast and needed to cleanse myself, I was delayed for a while. I must have kept everyone waiting for a long time." Imo Hanyin with courteous etiquette, but there wasn't the slightest sliver of apology behind her words. "Haha, the Duchess is too courteous. It does not matter at all for us to wait for a while. Health is more important." Who didn't know how to spout these words of polite courtesy? The left royal concubine by Qing was incredibly smooth and slick, a highly socially adept person, skilled at smoothing things over, and she had resolved that tense atmosphere so very easily. "In that case, then let's dine." Imo Hanyin curled up her lips in a manner that felt rather disdainful when her eyes suddenly raised up slightly. "Where are those 2 children from the tranquil abode?" The moment those words came out, everyone began to look left and right to search, but after searching a full round, it was still to no avail. Most of the people in there did not have much of an impression about the residents of the tranquil abode. But, for Yin Shirua and Yin Shiwu, the 2 of them had recently just seen Qingyu, and it was clear to them that she had not come at all. Ever since they had been stirred to become rather out of sorts at the tranquil abode the last time, the 2 of them had been acting as if they had been possessed, subconsciously wanting to protect her, so they clamped their mouths shut and did not say a word. "Yin Fei, are you certain that everyone has been informed?" Han Mo Yan's eyes were dark, her face showing a thin veil of rage. Yin Fei at her side immediately replied, "Duchess, the tranquil abode was the first one I informed and I do not know why they have not come." Imo Hanyin suddenly slammed her silver chopsticks onto the table and said in a cold voice, "They are really putting on quite an arrogant air." That loud sound immediately made everyone jump in shock, their hearts feeling jittery. Imo Hanyin's face looked like it was filled with ominous dark clouds, highly terrifying. She had intentionally come here late by 2 whole hours to make all these women properly remember who the real lady of the house was. Never had she thought that someone would dare to challenge her. Chapter 24. 2. Life's just a great big show everywhere, Duchess. Please appease your anger. Why not I go there once more? Yin Fei asked in a soft voice. No need. Imo Hanyin snorted coldly. The Duchess I will go there myself. With that, it was feared that those 2 people from the tranquil abode were about to meet with disaster. Just as everyone's mind were filled with their own thoughts, the rumble of wheels rolling on the ground slowly reached their ears, and a slender, figured white-clothed young lady slowly approached as she pushed the youth in on his wheelchair. The young girl was bewitchingly beautiful, and gazing upon her made their hearts' spirits soar. Although the youth in the wheelchair looked slightly frail and weak, his complexion pale, but his looks were still highly outstanding, a certain kind of handsomeness with more fragile types of talent. The young girl pushed the wheelchair, walking in unhurriedly. Qingyu surveyed her eyes one round over the room, smiling and nodding to the ladies before she looked at the beautiful lady on the main seat whose face was showing an unfriendly expression. Really sorry, Duchess. Because my younger brother is crippled in both his legs, he is unable to walk. And as my body is weak, we came here late. Qingyu said softly, her face remorseful. She was already originally good-looking, and with her brows now creased up in apologetic remorse, she looked just absolutely pitiful and helpless. But Hanamo Yin was not moved in the slightest, her gaze staring at the face that was a little too good-looking. I have waited a full 2 hours for you. Just how weak are you that you have to walk 2 whole hours to reach here? The moment those words came out, the other women below were all silently cursing in their hearts. Isn't she being too shameless here? She had clearly been putting on airs when she made all of them wait for 2 hours earlier, and she isn't feeling the least bit embarrassed to say those words? From the time she came and sat down till now, it was thought that the chair under her behind had not even been warmed. Because of the indignant hatred all of them had towards Imo Han Yin, they all began to feel a twinge of sympathy for Qingyu. This pair of siblings have such a tough life. It's feared that they are in for a bad time today. With Imo Han Yin finding fault with her, the little young girl's face became more aggrieved. Duchess, you must have known that the tranquil abode is the most remote place in the entire Duke's Manor. To walk all the way here, 2 hours, is already very quick. What she said was really not untrue, as the Eternal Peace Duke's Manor is the largest manor around with the exception of the Imperial Palace. If one wanted to tour the entire place, they would have to take a horse carriage or a palanquin, as if they were to go one full round on foot. Their feet would have swollen right up. Which among all those ladies and young misses there were not used to fine clothes and gourmet food on a daily basis, and used to being waited upon hand and foot. Asking them to walk for 2 whole hours, it was feared that they would have long collapsed from exhaustion on the ground and not be able to get up at all. And the tranquil abode was indeed the most remote place throughout the entire manor. Among the places the others lived in, some were rather far away as well, but they were still able to reach here within a few quarters, with the furthest one among them taking an hour at most. If they were to really go to the tranquil abode, it would already take them an hour by horse carriage, not to mention these 2 unfavored children born from a commoner mother, who were not even given the right to take the horse carriage. In their hearts, they began to pity the 2 young children. Imo Han Yin had not thought that the young lass would even dare to talk back, and her eyes widened. Are you saying that the Duchess I am purposely making things difficult for you? Qingyu doesn't dare. But we really did not mean to come late, and we plead for the Duchess to not place blame onto us. The young lady lowered her eyes submissively, looking so innocent and pitiful, which made it impossible for Imo Han Yin to do anything even when she wanted to find trouble with Qingyu. Forget it. Sit down and eat. Imo Han Yin's brows creased up, taking the lead to pick up her chopsticks first. With the day's events having dragged on for so long, she was really feeling rather hungry. Qingyu relayed her thanks and pushed Qingbei closer to the dining table before she took a seat herself. Because they had come late, they sat at the furthest end. Chapter 24. 3. Life's just a great big show everywhere. During the meal, it was quiet at the table. Because they were all women in a noble family, they had been well instructed in manners and etiquette from young, where they were not allowed to speak while eating and to be silent when they sleep. They were not even supposed to make any noise while chewing their food. But today, it seemed that they would not be able to maintain the silence they had become accustomed to. At that moment, everyone paused with their chopsticks in their hands to stare speechlessly at the other end of the dining table. Little Bei, eat this. This one tastes rather great. Have more meat. Look at how skinny you are. The youths who are your age in other places are more buff than you. Eat a little bit more. Fill up your stomach, and you will not have to eat later at night. I have never eaten such good dishes before. Living without knowing when your next meal is going to come has been really tough. The Duchess is really so nice that she would specially ask us to come for a meal. Qingyu was just heaping it all into her mouth, and also piling the food she picked up onto Qingbei's bowl, making a small mountain form up on it. It was all an assortment of meats in his bowl, a greasy and oily mountain. The youth did not say a word, but just lowered his head as he took small bites of the food, seemingly rather shy. But who would have known that the reason he had his head lowered was because he was fighting to hold his laughter in, not wanting a single sound to escape out of his mouth. The heavens knew that this was the first time he was seeing this side of his sister, and he saw that she really knew how to pour it on, her acting so realistic that even he himself was almost taken in by her. Across from him, Qingyu was still chattering on as she ate, the sound of her chewing exceptionally loud. That was not all. She had even moved several dishes that she liked more right in front of her, and digging into it by herself, looking like she had not eaten anything in years. Mouthful after mouthful was stuffed right into her mouth, making every wonder just how the stomach of a tiny petite little one like her was able to contain so much. That is just absolutely boorish and crude. Imo Han Yin was so furious her face was all red. To think that a young miss of the Eternal Peace Duke's manor would be so uncouth and unschooled in etiquette and manners. Just look at how you look now. You are no different from the riff-raffs among the commoners. Has the Duchess, I mistreated you? Have I not given you food to eat? Qing Yu was eating happily away, and with that sudden scare, she almost choked on her food, driving her to quickly take a gulp of water to catch her breath. Duchess, my brother and I have really not eaten anything so nice for such a long time already. We are given only 2 steamed buns every day, and we are just too hungry. Qing Yu said as she lowered her head in aggrievement. It's all right if I do not eat, but as my younger brother is not well, seeing him not even able to fill his stomach every day just pains me greatly. I understand that there are a great number of people in the Duke's manor, and we are living in a destitute condition with father always killing off enemies out on the battlefield. I do not dare ask for too much. Can we be given a few more steamed buns in future? Seemingly overwhelmed by sorrow, the young girl kept her head lowered and could not say another word, her shoulders shaking as she choked on her sobs. Cough, cough, cough. While those words rang out, several suppressed and stifled coughs were heard from the frail and skinny youth, which made the sibling pair look even more pitiful. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU among all the females present, with the lone exception of Imo Han Yin, every other single woman there was moved, their eyes filled with sympathy and pity. The Duchess had really been too petty. It was to 2 such young children, and she could really treat them so harshly. If the young girl had not spoken of it today, they would not have known that the Eternal Peace Duke's manor had become so thrifty. Even the servants had meat for every meal. Although the tranquil abode was not favored, but they were after all still a legitimate young master and young miss of the Duke's manor. Was it really that hard for them to just be able to fill their stomachs? Imo Han Yin saw all the women below her looking at her with reproach in their eyes, and her face almost turned green from anger. She slammed her hand hard on the table. That is complete hogwash. Chapter 25. 1. The truth back then seeing her looking like she was about to stamp her feet in rage, Qing Yu smiled to herself in her heart, but her face did not change at all. Qing Yu will not dare to lie. If the Duchess does not believe me, you can investigate into it. Imo Han Yin did not say anything, but the gaze that stared at Qing Yu was dark and filled with venom. The lass had really embarrassed her, and it had really infuriated her. Haha, that must be a misunderstanding. Bai Qing saw that the atmosphere had turned extremely tense, and she laughed feebly as she stood up to mediate. The Duchess has lived in seclusion for many years, and although she still handled the manor's internal affairs, having to take care of so many people would inevitably result in some things being overlooked. It must be due to some foolish mistake committed by some bumbling servants in the manor. Just get the steward to go look into the matter, and everything will be resolved. As she spoke, she looked gently at the aggrieved-looking young girl and said, Don't worry. With the Duchess watching over you, the 2 of you will not be unfairly treated from now on. Thank you, royal concubine. Thank you, Duchess. Qing Yu cast a grateful glance onto Bai Qing, and then looked hopefully at Imo Han Yin. With Bai Qing having stirred things to reach such a stage, if Imo Han Yin did not do anything about the last situation, then she would be seen as petty and narrow-minded, one without the generosity of the heart to accept others. Imo Han Yin took a deep breath and fought hard to suppress the rage that filled her chest, pausing at every word like they had been squeezed out through the gaps between her gritted teeth. As the Duchess, I will naturally ensure it. Yin Fei, your servant is here. What orders does the Duchess have? Convey my word. From now on, everything that the tranquil abode eats, wears, uses, and lives in will be of the same standards as the ladies in the manor, and that the servants must be able to differentiate and identify the positions of master and servant. If it is discovered that there are any instances of errant servants who do not know their place and oversteps their boundaries to offend their masters, they will all be thrown out of the manor, without exception. If any of such news is spread outside, there will be much gossip about the Duke's manor. But compared to having the tranquil abode completely rebuilt and carry out a major reconstruction, this was still better. With this, are you satisfied? Imo Han Yin snorted derisively. I heard that His Highness wanted to rebuild the tranquil abode. You should know that it will mean spending a great deal of money and time. Duchess, you can be assured that I will speak with Father. My younger brother and I have gotten used to staying in the tranquil abode, and we do not wish for there to be any changes. Qingyu had already guessed what she was going to say, and she immediately took over the mic from her with a wide smile. Looking at the young girl's face with such an obedient smile, Imo Han Yan's heart then subconsciously had a feeling that she seemed to have been swindled, but she immediately denied it herself. The lass only has great looks. Humph. When it comes to the mind, the lass would not be able to fight her at all. That woman had completely snatched away the Duke's heart back then, and she must not just sit back and await death, to allow that woman's children to steal the limelight from her once again. After a while, under all that incredibly abnormal atmosphere, each of them carrying their own inner demons, the women finished that most uncomfortable and repressive meal they ever had. If they disregarded the tranquil abode's sibling pair's irredeemable table etiquette, and Imo Han Yan's face that had changed colors like a coloring palette, everything else was rather great. But, from then onwards, Imo Han Yan would probably not ever ask that pair of siblings to come to the main house to dine anymore. The disgust was already too much for her. But to not have to spend such a great amount of money to reconstruct the tranquil abode had saved them a big expenditure. Not just for Imo Han Yin, the other were also over the moon with happiness, as the money saved would be enough for them to buy a whole season's worth of clothes. Coming to the main house for the banquet, Qingyu had indeed took her time to leisurely stroll for 2 whole hours before they reached, but for the way back, Qingyu employed a trick. With a single shift in dimensional space, they returned to the tranquil abode in a blink. Chapter 25. 2. The truth back then with nobody watching them anymore. Qing Bei no longer pretended to be crippled but nervously walked over before Qingyu. Sis, you ate so much with your act earlier. Aren't you feeling uncomfortable? Although it was just an act, but she had gone too far. She had always had a small appetite, and Qing Bei had never seen her eat so much. Moreover, they had all been greasy meat dishes where even he had only taken a pretentious little bite of those meats himself. I did not eat anything, Qingyu said as she blinked her eyes innocently. I clearly saw you eat so much. Qing Bei's were wide as he stared. They had been sitting just across each other, and at that close distance, how could he possibly be mistaken? I really did not eat anything. Qingyu spread her hands wide helplessly. It was merely a quick sleight of hand. The food were all shifted out from my mouth, and I did not eat a single bite. What? Qing Bei's face was incredulous. Shifted out to where? You know those ferocious dogs that are kept in the Duke's manor? I gave all of it to them. I am guessing that they're now all full and contented and snoring in their sleep. Qingyu said with a laugh. When one cultivated the buried soul arts to a certain level, they would be able to fast completely without any sustenance at all. At times when she cultivated, it was common for her to not even take a drop of water at all for an entire month. And when she ate, it was in very small portions. She did not eat to fill her stomach, but only because of the loneliness of the mouth, just feeling that chewing something would alleviate the urge. Hearing her explain, Qing Bei then nodded his head as it dawned on him. So that's what happened. I had been worried that you might have overstuffed yourself by eating so much. Moron. Am I the kind of fool that drags myself into it when scheming against people? Qingyu rolled her eyes at him indignantly. His mouth then split into a bashful smile. Qingyu sat down and poured herself a cup of water before she took a sip. She then smiled and said, With this, that woman most probably would not carelessly come find trouble with us anymore. After this time, I believe she knows that I am not one that is easily manipulated. But if just the reconstruction of the tranquil abode was able to force her to come out of seclusion, I am a little suspicious how that woman was able to swallow her pride and remain silent for so many years. Once those words came out of her mouth, she saw Qing Bei looking at her gravely. Without waiting for her to ask aloud, he gave a long sigh and said, "Although you have always said that you are not the real Qingyu, but having just heard you say these words, it seems that I really have to believe you, that Qingyu really isn't here anymore. Our mother left just after giving birth to us. The Duchess had always been jealous of Mother, hated Mother. Hence, even after she's no longer around, the Duchess still detests the place that Mother had lived in before, and Mother's children." Qing Bei's face was grave and serious, his clear and good-looking up-slanted eyes fixed straight on her. "In actual fact, Qing Yu and I are not Father's biological children, but the truth of this matter is known only to Father and the Duchess." His hands had unconsciously clenched up into fists, seemingly trying very hard to suppress something inside, struggling so much that the green veins were visibly bulging up on the back of his hands. Qingyu did not say anything, but merely looked at him quietly. The youth must be struggling very hard in his heart at that moment, faced with the past that he had never wanted to recall. What she could do was only to listen attentively. "I had only come to learn of it when I accidentally overheard the Duchess' conversation with her subordinate." The youth closed his eyes, his voice suddenly turning a little hoarse. "But most unfortunately, I was discovered. She ordered for people to break both my legs and forced poison that could turn me into an idiot down my throat. That year, I was only 5. Chapter 25. 3. The truth back then, when other children were indulging in fun and laughter with abandon, all running wildly and playing, I was confined in my wheelchair, like a bird whose wings were clipped, yearning to soar in the sky, which was all just a hopeless longing." When the youth opened his eyes again, his eyes were red and bloodshot, the garish color of blood letting Qingyu see a kind of sorrow she had never seen before. Her heart suddenly sank deeply, an intense hatred seemingly having spread into her from him, sharing the same sentiment. Looking back throughout her past life, Qingyu had been betrayed by her closest kin and made use of by her family clan. But as she had been living in those circumstances from a very young age, her heart had long died, without feeling the slightest ripple of emotion. Even when at the end of it, when even her last hope was destroyed, she had only felt being really tired of that filthy world and did not want to live anymore. Revenge? She had never once thought of it. With the kind of powers she had then, toppling that world would just be merely lifting a finger. But even if that world disappeared, so what? In the end, wouldn't she still be alone by herself, muddling through her life without meaning? So she had chosen to die away quietly, as once she was dead, then there would be no more struggling, no more scheming and deceit, where she would no longer have to see the ugly faces of those hypocrites. With her dying a quiet death, the world would then be complete, and how great was that? Was she really such a noble person? Hey, maybe she was a hypocrite herself, always thinking that she's a savior, caring for all under the heavens. But there were also things that she was powerless against. Like when she saw those friends who treated her with true hearts die because of her. Besides watching them breathing their very last breath right before her eyes, there was nothing she could do. So when she was reborn into this world, she believed only in one thing, and that was to live for herself, to live for people whom she wanted to protect. But before that, she needed to possess unparalleled and unmatched power and authority. Qingyu reached out a hand and gently ran it over the top of those red bloodshot eyes. "It all right now, little Bei. I will make sure that all the suffering you've endured will be all paid back bit by bit." The youth's body stiffened for a second and then slowly relaxed. The eyes under her hand blinked lightly twice. "You will always be by my side, right?" She said that she was a soul from another world. Then would she also have to disappear one fine day? Sensing his unease, Qingyu reached out and hugged him lightly. I will always be with you." When she had died in her previous life, it had been because she had no more lingering worry. But here in this current life, she would not allow for any element to be able to threaten her and to anyone she treasured. Anything that obstructed her way forward, she would eliminate them all one by one. The Crown Prince's palace had received an esteemed guest who had been staying in there for the past few days already. Exact details about the identity of the person was not known, but endless delicacies and fine wine were sent in there every day. The palace servants inside merely served the guest respectfully and did not dare slack off in the slightest. At that moment, upon the cozy and beautiful carved wood lounge chair in the ancillary courtyard, laid a man who had his eyes closed, dozing soundly. The sound of light footsteps came in from outside, and the eyelids of the man twitched slightly, his eyes opening. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Someone pushed the door open to enter. A tall and slim figure dressed in an ivory-colored long robe covered with a dragon motif. His features gentle and handsome. The crown prince himself, Xin Yuanche. How are you feeling? Are you still feeling any discomfort anywhere? Xin Yuanche asked, as he raised a hand to take the other man's pulse. The other man pulled his hand back and gave Xin Yuanche a disgruntled glance. I've already said that I'm fine. You're such a nag. A twitch formed at Xin Yuanche's temple, and he said with a mirthless smile, You think I really want to come bother myself with you? It's just that if you come to die here in my crown prince's palace, it will cause me all sorts of unnecessary trouble. Chapter 26. 1. Stirrings of Love in the Youth TSK. How cold-blooded. We are still brothers after all, you know. The man said as he clicked his tongue at the corner of his mouth. Climbing down off the soft lounge, he picked up the flask of wine from the table and took a long drag from its spout. The crystal-clear liquid spilled out from one end of his lips and dripped down from his perfectly sculpted chin, running down his neck and into his clothes. Achi, I told you that you must not drink for a while. Xin Yuanche creased up his brows, reaching out with his large hand to snatch the wine flask over. The man was not bothered, but merely propped his chin on one hand to look at Xin Yuanche. Is the crown prince always such a busybody, that he doesn't even allow people to drink? It had not been clear earlier with the light behind him, but after he had turned around, it could be seen that the man was extremely good-looking. His pair of eyes that could smile from birth were able to hook away a person's soul, those brows more alluring and seductive than a woman's. A pair of full, luscious lips, glistening brightly under the nourishment of wine, were incomparably enchanting. They were curved up in a devilish smiling arc at that moment, giving of a feeling of a bad boy. Xin Yuanche could not help but lost his senses for a moment, before his gaze deepened. I heard that father came to see you. Did you reject him? What a joke. He thinks he can see me just because he wants to. Who does he think he is? Xin Yuanche, he is your imperial father. Xin Yuanche was a little displeased, and he called out his full name. The man put a finger in his ear to dig it nonchalantly as he cast a sideways glance at Xin Yuanche. Have you gotten old and have grown forgetful? 10 years ago, he had already decreed to the world that he has broken off all ties with me. If not for you, I will not even care to come to this place. Pausing for a while, he then continued, And one more thing. I am now called Muchi, don't call me by the wrong name. Xin Yuan is the imperial family's surname, and anyone using that surname carelessly will have to lose his head, and I still want to live for a few more years. Xin Yuanche's eyes then dimmed. The two of them were originally the two most qualified candidates in competition to become the heir apparent to the throne. But because of an unforeseen accident, Xin Yuanche incurred the wrath of the Green Wave Emperor, causing him to fly into a rage and removed his title as a prince, completely severing their ties as father and son. But the real reason behind it was not known by anyone. Xin Yuanche's character had been cold and one of indifference from young, and only Xin Yuanche was able to really get him to play together. Hence, the two of them had naturally been inseparably close. That incident had happened too suddenly, and even Xin Yuanche had not been prepared for it. But Xin Yuanche, who had always talked to him about everything, had not said a word about that to him. After he endured the palace's punishment, he had then left the place without any hesitation. And with that departure, it was for 10 whole years. Xin Yuanche had only just met him about a year ago. The brothers reunited. But it seemed like something had changed. He was clearly still a jovial guy, who loves to play and laugh, but between them, there seemed to be a certain kind of obstacle, and they were no longer able to return back to the way they were before. Xin Yuanche sat down beside him, and slowly opened his mouth to say, "Just why did you have to leave, to abandon your brother so callously?" Back then, they had clearly said that they would be brothers for life, never turning their backs to that brotherhood. Muchi smiled and slapped Xinyuan Che on the back of his shoulder. "Why are you doing looking so gravely depressed? Who abandoned you, you strange freak? Is it because you couldn't find anyone to play with when I was not around?" Xinyuan Che stared fixedly at him. There wasn't the slightest bit of mirth in his expression. Seeing Xinyuan Che looking like that, Muchi then sighed and said helplessly, "All right, I said that we are brothers, and we forever will be. No matter for whatever reason, it will never change." That just clearly showed that he was not willing to speak much about that. Chapter 26. 2. Stirrings of love in the youth. Xinyuan Che's eyes were dark, and he did not force the issue. Achi looked outwardly like a completely heartless fella, but his heart and mind were sensitive and meticulous. If he did not want to speak about it, then no one would be able to get anything out of him no matter how much one asked. "That's right. I wanted to ask, how did you get injured? You got yourself into such a wretched state." The moment he asked that, Muchi's smile on his face immediately congealed, and he then said, seemingly rather discomfited, "I don't even want to speak about that. I went out with my friends to reminisce about old times while having a few drinks. On the way back, I just had to stumble into an intense fight between two great forces in the pugilist world. I did not want to draw trouble to myself, and was just about to make detour around them when those people suddenly assumed that I was going to make a report and tell on them, where they then attacked me like mad." Xinyuan Che grinned and said, "I've told you that drinking will only bring you trouble, and you refuse to listen. The day will come that you could be killed by a knife in the back, and you won't even know." This fella had already begun to sneak into the imperial wine cellar and stole wine to drink when he was just 3 years old. Hence, he had trained his body to develop a great tolerance for wine, sober after 1,000 cups, drinking wine like he was drinking water. Hearing the admonishing words, Muchi remained indifferent, but just curled his mouth up in a sneer. Suddenly remembering something, the corners of his mouth then curled up and that good-looking and handsome face became more excited in an instant. Xinyuan Che arched up an eyebrow. "What are you thinking of that made you so happy?" "Huh, nothing." Muchi shook his head with a smile. "Ah yes, big brother, aren't you engaged to the Duke of Eternal Peace's daughter? How is it progressing? When do you intend to get married?" Xinyuan Che was taken aback a moment. "Why are you asking about that?" "I'm just showing you some concern." Muchi blinked his eyes lovingly. "I heard that this Yinning Ruo is a rare beauty throughout the lands, and only the Water Edge Kingdom's 9th princess can match up to her beauty under the heavens. You've really become the envy of people. If you like, why not you marry her?" Xinyuan Che's lips stiffened as he said, his mouth an imperceptible smile. "No, no, no, that must not happen. I do not have that kind of fortune. Firstly, I have no money, and secondly, I hold not authority. Even just marrying a woman from a good family will be hard for me." Muchi's face was looking sorrowful and forlorn, his brows knitted in grief. Xinyuan Che could not help but kick out with his foot at him. "You're still crying here about being poor? Do you think that I do not know that you took out 1 million in gold a few days ago? Why did you need so much money?" Muchi lifted an eyebrow up. "You're spying on me? What spying?" "I had merely come over to see you, and I unintentionally overheard you giving orders to your subordinates." "Oh, I see." Muchi rubbed his chin. "It wasn't anything much. I was poisoned and injured, but was saved by someone. That was the remuneration that I promised the other party." Xinyuan Che's brows jumped up violently. Has this fella been conned, and he doesn't even realize it? It was 1 million, and in gold. That would be enough to buy an entire city already, you know? Isn't person just committing daylight robbery? "Who is this person that saved you?" Xinyuan Che asked with his brows knitted up. "What are you thinking of doing?" "Humph, that is pure extortion. 1 million in gold. You're so generous, aren't you? Giving it out just like that. Isn't my life not worth that 1 million in gold?" Muchi snorted derisively. "Don't tell me you're going to ask for it back? As the crown prince of the country, aren't you being a little too petty?" Xinyuan Che burst into mocking laughter from anger. "Seeing that you've been extorted of 1 million in gold, You seem to still be rather happy about it, aren't you? Chapter 26. 3. Stirrings of love in the youth, it's only 1,000,000 in gold, merely a drop in the ocean to me. Heh, all those people were so eager to flatter me, they were all rushing forward, only too happy to pay for me foolishly. It's not my money anyway, what's paid is paid. Moochie's eyes were two crescent arcs, his face split with a harmless and benign smile, looking just like an obedient boy next door. This fella had great looks, a highly intelligent mind, and possessed great gift and cultivation. Although he had been stripped of his title as a prince, but the lad still had a master who was from one of the 3 great sects of the lands, the Limitless sect. He was the last disciple accepted by the master, and was also the youngest among the disciples. Great-looking and with a honeyed tongue, he was greatly doted upon by his seniors, male and female alike. However big the amount of people who were fighting tooth and nail seeking to gain the instruction of the Limitless sect's sect leader would mean that the same number of people would be fawning on and trying to win the favor of this most favored disciple in the inner circle. Hence, it could well be imagined how rich this fella could very well be. So, 1,000,000 taels in gold to him really did not mean much. Xinyuanche sighed, feeling really helpless against him. All right. Don't stay here to give me such looks anymore. Hurry up and go busy yourself with your own things. Yawn, I'll sleep for a while more. Moochie yawned lazily and waved his hand dismissively at Xinyuanche before he climbed back up onto the soft lounge. Turning his back to the crown prince, Moochie then fell asleep. Xinyuanche was speechless. Qingyu had been helping her younger brother to train his actual combat abilities the past few days, and she also had to engage in a battle of wits and guts with Imo Hanyan. And those ladies and young misses who were so idle with nothing better to do were intermittently coming in through her doors as well. It was only till she had some free time that she came to realize that she had forgotten about her promise to go purge the poison for Lu Junyao another time after a few days. She changed into a set of male clothing and disguised her face slightly before she went out through a side door. The gathered cloud loft was 2 streets away from the Duke's manor, in a dark alley. Saying that it was far, it really wasn't all that long a distance away. It was about time for dinner, and there wasn't too many people on the street, or Qingyu would have been stuck for quite a while, blocked by the crowd before she would be able to get out. Actually, if she were to disguise her looks to become uglier, then she wouldn't attract that much attention. But she had found that too bothersome and was too lazy to spend so much effort just to turn her face into one that she would not be able to recognize herself. She traversed past 2 streets and was just walking into the alley where she would soon see the gathered cloud loft. "Miss," a nice-sounding voice tinged with smiles suddenly rang out. Qingyu lifted a brow, guessing that it must be a young couple out and about. The setting sun's rays were beautiful. Arranging to meet at dusk? Yup. It's great to be young. Miss, why are you ignoring me? The voice had become a little mournful. She guessed that the young lad must have made his sweetheart unhappy, and his sweetheart must be throwing a tantrum. Qingyu was confident she was right, and she continued her way forward. Almost there at last. A gust of wind suddenly blew past her from behind, and a person was suddenly standing in front of her, dressed in silver, slender and tall figure, a head of black hair bound up by a single silver hairband, looking refreshed and highly trained. It was a young man who looked to be about 17 or 18 years old, his smiling eyes making him easily likable, not to mention his exceptionally handsome good looks, a splendid example of a fine young man. When one saw beautiful things, their moods were always great, and Qingyu was no exception. But having him appear so suddenly in front of her to block her way, and addressing her as Miss, that wasn't really all that great for her. "This young master here, are we acquainted?" Qingyu said, smiling gently and gracefully. Who else would this handsome lad be but Moochie? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He had immediately come keep watch outside the Eternal Peace Duke's manor the moment he awoke, and had waited so long before he saw her come out. Don't even ask how he was still able to recognize her, even after she had disguised herself before she came out. Because he would never admit, back at that time when he was barely conscious from the poison, he had felt himself surrounded by the aura emanating from this young lady that made him feel so ease, and that was a feeling that he would not fail to recognize. Moreover, she possessed such a beautiful pair of eyes. But why is she not able to remember her already? Chapter 27. 1. Are you going to offer yourself in marriage? Once Muchi realized that she had forgotten who he was, he immediately said a little anxiously, "Miss, look carefully. Do you really not remember me?" Qingyu arched up an eyebrow. "Am I supposed to remember you? You've forgotten that you saved me the other night and that I have even gotten people to deliver 1,000,000 taels of gold right before your door?" Muchi's face was serious as he tried to explain. Qingyu's face did not show the slightest change in expression, but in her heart, she had already carefully looked over this fella from head to toe. The night he was poisoned, his face had been bruised and it was impossible to see how he looked clearly. But she could now see that he wasn't all that bad looking at all. Still, how was he able to recognize her through her disguise? Not to mention that he was just a stranger whom she had only met once. Even little Bei had been stunned for a good while the first time he saw her looking like this. "Look here, lad. You have a good look as well." Qingyu smiled and stretched her hand out to tap him on the shoulder. "I am male. Although I'm quite good looking, but for you to address a guy as miss, that is an insult to me." The corner of Muchi's mouth twitched. "Miss, let's not parry with Tai Chi anymore, all right? I saw you coming out of the Eternal Peace Duke's Manor's back door with my own eyes. Just admit it, would you?" Qingyu did not say a word. This kid really isn't being cute at all. With all that's been said, there was no meaning in continuing to play dumb. Qingyu herself was not a person who played coy all that much, and she immediately gave helpless shrug of his shoulders. "All right, I'll admit it. What do you want by following behind me like this?" Muchi's face then split into a smile, his eyes bright and sparkling with blinding brilliance. His eyes enchanting, he said, "I would like to know you." "My name is Muchi Msu Yen," Qingyu said with a nod of his head, making up a random name. "You know me now. That should be all right. I still have business to attend to and we'll part here." Upon saying that, she went right past him and continued her way forward. Muchi froze a moment and then hastened to catch up. "Where are you going? Can I help?" "No need. Thanks. You don't need to be so courteous with me. You are my savior after all, and I still want to repay you. You've paid me my remuneration, and we do not owe each other anything. A drop of water's benevolence must be repaid as a gushing spring. Moreover, a debt of benevolence for having saved another person's life is one great as the heavens. That is not something that mere material things like money can possibly offset." Qingyu suddenly halted her steps and turned herself around with an eyebrow raised to look at the lad with a serious face. "Then what do you want to do?" He had been so righteous-sounding just one moment ago when he suddenly turned coy and squeamish, his eyes looking slightly evasive. Qingyu burst out laughing upon seeing him like this and said mockingly, "You can't possibly be thinking to offer yourself up in marriage, are you?" Upon meeting those devilishly alluring eyes of hers, and that expression with that imperceptible smile, Muchi's heart grew flustered. He then thought of how all women all the way up to 80 years old and even children down to 4 years old were always so easily coaxed by that glib silver tongue of his. But before the young lady here, he had suddenly become inarticulate and awkward, unable to even complete his sentences. She was teasing him jokingly and with such a wicked expression on her face, no different from that of a thug taking liberties with a good young lady, but alas, wrapped in such a great-looking flesh exterior, not only was one unable to get angry, it would make people more than willing to suffer from it. For the first time, Muchi felt that he had become a little strange, and he did not know what was happening to him. He just kept his eyes lowered and squirmed coyly there for a good while. Waiting till he had finally summoned up his courage, he raised his head up, only to discover that there was no one in front of him at all. "I'm really such an idiot," he howled in frustration, and then raised a hand up to hit himself viciously on the head. Chapter 27. 2. Are you going to offer yourself in marriage? What is there to be so shy about? He is a man. The young lady had not even shown any bashfulness, and here he was acting all shy. Really, even he was beginning to despise himself. Muchi was feeling rather depressed. He had lost the person just like that. But At least he got to know her name. Su Yin. What a nice-sounding name. He tried to comfort and reassure himself for a while, and then walked out from the alley. The sun was setting over the western horizon. Time to find a wine house for a few drinks. After Qingyu shook off her tail, she did not go in through the front door, but just sprung herself straight up to leap atop a wall, and stood high up there to watch the foolish lad walk a far distance away before she blew out a breath in relief. Fortunately, he did not follow all the way up here. Young Master Qing? The past few days had been rather good for Bai Jiyan. As the Lord was feeling much better, his mood had naturally become better. It had been especially easy to talk to Lu Junyao these past few days. Like now, he had just suggested to the Lord to go out for a walk to familiarize themselves with the surroundings, and the latter had agreed to it so readily. The two of them had just come out from that sealed room not too long, and they've spotted a figure crouched furtively atop the wall. The gathered cloud loft's construction had a unique layout, and even that wall was quite a bit higher than those in most manors. And their walls were built with special materials, completely smooth and slippery. No need to mention crouching on top of the wall. Most people would not even be able to scale that wall at all. That's right, and some time ago, Lianji had told him that this particular little young master had a strange habit of not using the front door, but liked to enter by leaping over the walls. Hence, when Bai Jiyan saw the back of that figure, he had immediately been able to recognize it. Once he spoke, Lu Junyao had naturally noticed it as well. The little figure on the wall, a tiny person curled up in a ball, crouched high up above, looking rather adorable and amusing. But Qing Yu's attention had been focused on whether that persistent lad had left or not, and in the end, someone had called out to her out of the blue, and her body had jumped from the sudden shock, her foot slipping out under her. Lu Junyao's eyes narrowed when he saw that the small figure was going to fall from above, and he suddenly stretched his hand out. A gentle force suddenly held on to her, slowing her descent, till she landed safely on the ground. Qingyu was astounded for a moment, before she raised her head to nod her head at Lu Junyao with a smile. "Thank you. It's no trouble, as long as you're fine." Lu Junyao then raised an eyebrow, his pair of violet eyes deep. "You have come here for?" "I had some matters to attend to in the past few days, and I was so busy I forgot I was supposed to come over. In the end, I had just stepped out through my doors when I encountered a pesky fella." Qing Yu's face was one of helplessness as she opened her palms to say, "I really cannot be too kind. The next time I see anyone being pursued or poisoned by their enemies, I must not let myself save them without thinking." Lu Junyao's gaze paused a moment, and his voice then let out a deep laugh. "Then I have been most fortunate that I was saved by you before that." Qing Yu blinked her eyes. "You're different." Lu Junyao's demeanor appeared slightly taken aback. "Different? That's right. You're a creditor. I owed you a debt and I cannot refuse to save you." Qing Yu said jokingly, "Do you have water? I'm dying of thirst. I had to really chatter on for quite a bit earlier." As she spoke, she walked past the two men and just went straight inside. Qing Yu's had always been a candid character, and having been here so many times, she had grown to become familiar with the people here. Added to that was her excellent disguise as a male, possessing an extraordinary air, blessed with heavenly allure. They were all mostly female inside, and every time she came here, they all crowded around her like bees to honey, a kind of charm that even Bai Jiyan had to admit defeat to. In the room, Bai Jiyan then took up guard by the door. Chapter 27. 3. Are you going to offer yourself in marriage? Lu Junyao was propped up and leaning back on the bed, a hand stretched out to rest upon a low side table, as the young youth's porcelain white slender fingers pressed against his wrist, a little cold to the touch. The pair of alluring long up-slanted phoenix-like eyes' focus was concentrated on him, as once she used her X-ray vision, her entire person would be fully focused upon it, unable to feel or sense anything on the outside at all, her body in a state highly vulnerable to attacks and other dangers. Hence, Bai Jiyan was standing guard outside to protect her. It's always said that when a person is fully focused on a particular task, that person will exude a particular kind of indescribable charm. And that was exactly what was happening to Qing Yu at that moment. Unconsciously, Lu Junyao's gaze then paused upon that peerlessly exquisite face on the young youth. Compared to most regular youths, This kid was slightly taller and more slender, almost looking a little thin, his small body seemingly light, not even 2 tails worth of flesh on him. With skin slightly on the pale side, it gave people the feeling he was a weak, pale-faced little kid. Though he was blessed with devilish looks that could bring ruin onto the world, but an air of righteousness hovered between those brows. People like this held complete disregard for worldly norms and conventions, but were the most righteous and kindest of people. Lu Junyao had lived for several hundred years, and he had never misjudged a person. This young youth was a talent with great potential. After a period of time it would take to have a cup of tea passed, Qingyu then retracted her hand and blew out a breath of tainted air. "You're finally all right. Your body is very healthy now. There were a few residual effects from your prior condition, and I've eradicated all the problems for you at the same time. After this, I will get rid of the blood curse for you. But you'll have to wait for a while." "Why do we have to wait for a while longer?" Bai Jiyin came walking in from outside the door to ask in bewilderment. Qingyu rubbed her chin as she smiled. "That is because unraveling a curse is best done right around midnight." Being bitten back in the middle of the night within their dreams. That should be quite interesting. "Ah, that's how it is." Bai Jiyin did not understand all that much about curse seals and such, but he did not probe deeper into it, but just believed the young youth. Midnight came very soon. Bai Jiyin retreated outside, with him and Lian Ji taking up guard on the left and right, prepared for anything unexpected. No lights were lit inside the room, but for the countless luminous pearls on both sides giving out a soft glow that brightened and darkened intermittently. A man lay on the bed, not covered by a single thread. But Qingyu was not in the mood to admire that impossibly beautiful body of the man, but was staring with great interest at the red on his chest that was sinisterly spreading out gradually in all directions, growing countless waving malevolent tentacles that crawled to cover the entire body, where even that most handsome-looking face was not spared. His entire person looked like a monster that was bathing in dark blood-red lines. Qingyu's eyes looked upon the man with curiosity, with interest, but there was no disgust nor fear. "Aren't you scared?" he said with his lips curled up, seemingly a little scornful. This was the first time he was showing himself in this state before a stranger, and it was before such a young youth. But Lu Junyao did not let any complicated emotions into his heart to trouble him, but remained at peace. Even he himself did not know why there was a feeling of comfort in him that he had never felt before. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU as if this person before his eyes would really be able to save him. Qingyu laughed softly and tilted her head to look at him. "It's nothing scary. You who are being helplessly trapped in terror should be the one being most afraid. And this curse seal is suppressing at least half of your power. You must be feeling rather defeated. This man must surely reign supreme over a certain place out there, one with unparalleled power at the peak of his power. But with his powers suppressed, he had to live in hiding. Such a kind of setback where one fell from such a high place was something most people would not be able to accept. But not this man. He's acting like he's perfectly fine, a person with a strong will and forbearance." Chapter 28. 1. Injured Lu Junyao was a little puzzled that she could actually tell that his powers had been suppressed, and he laughed softly. "That's right. In Cloud Heaven, if a powerful pugilist was to fall, those lowly rats who had always been eyeing that position would all gather together onto him. The world is a place where the weak would always be the ones suppressed and bullied." Qingyu nodded her head in understanding, and then patted him on the arm comfortingly. "Rest assured, I am still confident with a blood curse like this. Wait till you regain your strength, and you can strike right back at them. For all those who have bullied and humiliated you, just go back and wreak vengeance upon them all." Lu Junyao smiled without saying a word. This kid is really rather interesting. It was almost midnight, and Qingyu shot out a hand speedily to strike Lu Junyao's acupoint, rendering him unconscious. It's gotta be a joke. Although he had said that he wanted to be awake to see how she was going to undo the curse, but she would never reveal her secrets that easily to prevent herself from being taken notice of in future. Qingyu sat herself down in a half-lotus position, her eyes shutting slowly. A faint soft glow emanated from her body, the light slowly growing brighter till it encompassed a good half of the room. Over the man whose body was covered in blood-red veins, the strange light began to pulse more quickly, and it seemed like something was scuttling around uneasily, trying to escape. And far away over several mountain ranges and oceans, upon a land that was of the highest level, the cloud heaven. Inside a luxurious and resplendent palace, within a particular courtyard, a woman lay upon a bed, but her brows were furrowed up slightly, seemingly in disturbed sleep. Her breathing suddenly grew more frantic, her face slightly pale. Her expression suddenly froze a moment, before a mouthful of blood spurted out of her mouth. The woman suddenly opened her eyes and sat up in her bed, the expression on her face incredulous. How is that possible? The emotion-devouring curse she had planted. Besides herself, no one else could possibly dispel it, but someone was actually undoing her curse. It's just ridiculous. The woman snorted in derision, and her long, slender finger drew a circle in the air, before she sent a powerful surge of tyrannical power out with a strike. No matter who that was, they have to die. The powerful force surged destructively straight towards her. Qingyu's brows knitted up slightly, like she had not expected that the other party would choose to retaliate like this. It seemed like she had met with a rather difficult foe, and the force was clearly intended to send her to her doom. That strike seemed to have been delivered with all its might. If she chose to retaliate right at the moment, then the blood curse that she had dispelled halfway would turn out to be for naught, and the unconscious Lu Junyao would be subjected to backlash that would be 100 times worse, and no matter how strong his heart was, he would undoubtedly lose his life. This person is crafty indeed. But is she that easily bullied? Regardless whether it was in her past life or present, Qingyu was a person who would not allow herself to suffer aggrievement, and even if she were to die, she would drag her opponent down into hell with her. Hence, when she took it upon herself to shoulder this terrifying power, she had naturally only done it after thinking deep and hard about it. Even if she was left with only half a breath, as long as her spirit did not die, she would be fine as she would just crawl into her dimensional space to heal her wounds. The spirit chi in there was thick and robust, and she would only need to remain in there for a few days for her to make a full recovery. But her opponent was not blessed with such a choice. At the moment that Qingyu took that strike, the most nefariously dark move among the burial soul arts, the bone-dissolving spirit extermination, was already following the trail of power, to viciously adhere itself onto the attacker. Arg! Within the quiet, tranquil night in cloud heaven, a heart-rending scream tore through the air, shattering the silence. The moment that terrifying power adhered onto her body, her flesh visibly dissolved right to the bones very quickly, her spirit sizzling as it burned. In the span of just a few breaths, half her arm had turned to bones. Steeling herself, the woman cut off that arm completely to stop the rot brought about by that surge of power. Chapter 28. 2. Injured, but even though all of that had happened in a few short moments, her spirit had sustained great damage, and she had no choice but to shut herself up in closed-door cultivation for continued nights. On the other side, Qingyu could feel that the power of the bone-dissolving spirit extermination she sent out had dissipated, and she knew in her heart that her opponent must have cut of an appendage off his body, or it was impossible to stop her dark art. Her opponent is quite vicious even to himself. But she had finally succeeded in dispelling the blood curse. Qingyu raised her eyes up towards the man on the bed. The red vein lines on his body seemed to have disappeared completely in an instant, and his powers had increased greatly. The suppressed powers were like a wild stallion freed from its tethers, spiraling out of control, quickly decimitating a good half of the painstakingly constructed room in a blink with a loud crash. The great resounding crash had not only alerted the two people standing guard just outside its doors, but shocked the people nearby awake from their sleep, thinking that a sudden clap of thunder had struck in the dead of the night. Not hearing any more noise after listening for a while, they then went back to sleep. Coincidentally, the weather in the past few days had not been great, and hence, it did not cause much alarm among the people. Bai Ji Yin and Lian Ji rushed inside speedily. On the bed, Lu Junyao was already dressed, in a robe of noble and majestic purple, his body tall and stalwart, his eyes chillingly cold, giving out an kingly aura where everything was beneath his notice. Lu Junyao like this felt both familiar and strange at the same time. But Bai Jiyin knew better. The kingly one who stood high and proud in cloud heaven, who had everyone in all directions submit themselves to him, has returned. Finally, his body no longer under restraint, he no longer had to lower that noble head, never having to suffer the inhuman agony and pain anymore. Qingyu's brow lifted up in surprise as well, feeling like she was getting to know this person for the first time. Right after that, she smiled knowingly and said, "Congratulations." Lu Junyao looked at her, and in that very rare moment, the corners of his lips lifted slightly. The two people were just a few steps apart, their gazes locked upon each other. Hence, Lu Junyao could clearly see that the young youth's smile was a little stiff, and his already pale complexion was extraordinarily white. He was just guessing whether the young youth had sustained injuries when he saw the specks of tiny red blossoms upon the youth's snow-white robe, a sight that stung his eyes. Qingyu's brows pinched tightly together, never having expected that she would not be able to hold out much longer, and just as her mind was filling up with frustration, her body had already gone ahead to fall forward. Having come to this strange world for so many days, this should be the first time that she was injured. The moment Lu Junyao discovered that something was not right with the kid, he was already there right before the youth. His hands stretched out to catch that body that was slipping down to the ground. The body felt as frail and weak as he had expected it to be, his waist so slender it might not be able to withstand a single clutch of his arm, soft and supple like a young lady's. Bai Jiyan's focus of attention had not been on Qingyu, and it was only when the figure of the youth was falling that he saw the specks of blood on his snow-white clothes, startling him. How did it turn out like this? Lu Junyao was not going to dwell into so much details. His sharp senses were telling him that the youth's aura was getting weaker and weaker, his body cold to the touch, and his heart subconsciously grew rather anxious. This was after all his benefactor who had saved his life, and he had gotten injured while saving him. No matter what, he was feeling rather bad about it. He scooped up the youth and carried him horizontally across his arms, and went straight into the room he usually used to rest in. Bai Jiyin, come check on his injuries right now. Bai Jiyin behind him was still in a daze. The Lord actually carried a youth in his arms. No matter how you looked at that scene, it was just too strange. Although the young youth looked so petite and skinny, and possessed beautiful and alluring looks, but he was clearly male. Thinking back to the gentle demeanor Lu Junyao usually treated the little youth with, his mind unconsciously grew with a whole lot of other ideas. Chapter 28. 3. Injured, get over here right now. Bai Jiyan's body shivered, and he immediately shot himself forward. Lu Junyao laid the figure down on the bed. Seeing the pair of eyes that were always spirited now shut, the exquisitely beautiful countenance unbelievably pale, his heart immediately became more jittery. Moreover, the youth's body was splattered with blood. Just the sight of it was offensive to his eyes. Immediately, he reached his hand out towards the youth's clothes, thinking to take off those white blood-stained clothes. But only the collar had been loosened and a large portion of that fair and smooth skin was exposed. Lu Junyao's hand suddenly froze. The youth's neck was beautifully slender, with an exquisitely sculpted collarbone, irresistibly enchanting. He knew that the youth was beautiful-looking, and he had a pretty-looking neck, but what astounded him was, upon that smooth neck, there wasn't an Adam's apple that was characteristic of a male. No matter how slowly a boy developed, it was impossible that he would not have an Adam's apple. Unless... Lu Junyao had some guesses in mind, and his slender finger conveniently pulled the white robe a few more notches down. What are you doing? A cold, tiny hand suddenly grasped his, stopping the man's inquisitive action. In a groggy daze, she had felt that someone was taking off her clothes. No matter how unconscious she was, when in a strange or unfamiliar place, her body would instinctively retain a level of alertness. Realizing that the man was going overboard, she hurriedly struggled to open her eyes to stop him. It must have been the series of movements just now that caused her hair to become a little messed up, and her clothes had also been tugged loose to expose her neck and collarbone. Her alluring phoenix-like eyes half open while looking at him rather warily, and her face pale as a sheet. She looked so pitifully frail in her weakened state. Lu Junyao did not need to verify it to know that this person here was actually a dainty young lady. Though the hand that was gripped around his fingers was slender, it was very thin, its touch soft and exquisite, definitely not the hand of a young male youth. "My lord, let me help." "Get out." Bai Jiyin had just come in through the door, and he had not even finished what he wanted to say when he immediately heard those two icily harsh words. "But isn't young Master Qing injured?" Bai Jiyin suddenly clamped his mouth shut and kept silent. Why had the Lord's face suddenly changed completely? Didn't the Lord just ask him to come, and now he suddenly wants him to go out? Really? After becoming stronger, his mood is also getting from bad to worse. He had no choice but to retreat back out. "Shut the door." Bai Jiyan's feet took a stumble, and then quietly pulled the door shut. Lu Junyao turned his gaze back around to look upon the youth who was struggling to keep his eyes open as he stared at him. "No, he should say young lady. Your clothes got dirty. I'll change them myself." Qing Yu's brows furrowed up as she struggled to sit upright. I'll be going back already. Damn it, that person was really vicious. Even till now, my body is still throbbing in pain. Are you certain you can still walk?" Lu Junyao looked at her in amusement. "I think you will not be able to even leap over the gathered cloud loft's perimeter wall. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World." Qing Yu's brows creased up once again, although she did not want to admit it, but it would seem like she really wouldn't be able to get up there. "Then, can I stay here for a night?" Qing Yu asked, as she looked at him a little helplessly. "Of course." Lu Junyao nodded with a smile, and then went on to ask in slight bewilderment. "Why would you get injured by dispelling the curse for me?" "Someone was controlling this blood curse, and when I was dispelling it, I exchanged a few blows with that person," Qing Yu said as she rubbed her shoulders. "Both sides got injured." Chapter 29. 1. Strange glasses, but he came off worse than me. Speaking about that, Qing Yu could not help but curl up her lips to smile triumphantly. The origins of that blood curse was not ordinary indeed. Lu Junyao's eyes flashed, a chilling and bloodthirsty brief flash within those demonically charming violet eyes. Qing Yu had already closed her eyes, her spirit already slipped into the dimensional space she always carried around. Her body had sustained severe damage, and if she did not immediately act on restoration, it might leave behind residual effects. Lu Junyao saw that she had already started to adjust her own aura, and because of her exceptional skills in medicine and powers, he was not so worried anymore. But he took another glance at that blood-stained white robe, knowing in his heart that she had disguised herself as a man, and decided to not change her out of her clothes. "Yuji," he called out softly. From a dark and empty corner, a woman wrapped in black sheer silk came walking out, her face half-veiled, revealing only a pair of bright black eyes. She knelt on one knee, her voice low and sultry. "My lord," Lu Junyao acknowledged briefly and said, "Help her change into another set of clothes." Yuji raised her head in astounded surprise, and then saw that there was a pale-faced, but devilishly alluring youth lying on the bed behind her lord. Although she was puzzled, she did not probe, but went walking over in accordance to her orders. As Yuji began to take of the youth's clothes, Lu Junyao had already gone far away from there. The clothes that had already been tugged loose did not require much effort to remove, and underneath those clothes was a thin and light layer of underclothes. When Yuji removed the outer robe, she had already realized that the slender and soft body, with clear signs of binding wrapped over the chest, obviously belonged to a female. No wonder the lord had. But what is the relationship between this young lady and her lord? The moment Qing Yu went into the dimensional space, she had immediately immersed herself completely in the spirit spring. The spirit energy in there nourished and nurtured her spirit over and over, even forging her meridians to become stronger a few notches. After this time, she had come to realize that she was still too weak. In these lands, she might be considered to be slightly above average, but further up above, there were still two higher-level lands. Someone like the opponent she encountered today must surely be quite a powerful entity. If not for the extra 20 years she had lived through in her previous life, and she had taken on the enemy only with what she had in this life, it was feared that she would already be dead, her spirit destroyed. This world here was even more brutal. Qingyu's desire to grow stronger became exceptionally intense. At that moment, even she herself did not know that her body that was submerged in the spirit spring was suddenly shooting out a dual-colored light of red and gold, where even the snake-shaped circlet that was coiled up quietly on one side was shaken awake by the sudden surge of power. What is happening? The little snake's face was one of confusion. It then came to see, right above the tiny little spirit spring, was an immense illusory shadow projected into the air. It was a pair of eyes red and gold in color, incredibly sinister and devilish as they stared at the little snake, filled with ridicule. Useless piece of trash. It was a powerful force filled with the majestic oppressiveness of ancient antiquity, that virile and powerful voice causing the little snake's head to spin dizzily, and it was a long while before it was able to come back to its senses. Damn it! Who do you think you are? How dare to insult a divine artifact? The little snake's narrow eyes were filled with fiery rage. Divine artifact? Where? Why do I not see any? The eyes pretended to gaze around in search, before they came to look at the little snake in feigned realization. Are you claiming that such a little worm like you is a divine artifact? Ha ha ha. You're really killing me. That was pure and utter humiliation. The little snake's eyes were spouting with fire, but that pair of eyes in the air were so sinister that they held the little snake firmly imprisoned, unable to move an inch. Chapter 29. 2. Strange eyes, all right? You can stop glaring at me already. However long you glare at me, you are still a useless piece of trash. The eyes threw out another statement of merciless ridicule. With all that is said, you were still once a powerful entity that shook the world, but has now fallen into decline, unable to even protect your mistress, and just hiding yourself in this small little space dimension to live an ignoble existence. How sad and depressing. And just what are you? The little snake narrowed its eyes to a slit, silently trying to guess it in its heart. I am the same as you, protecting the same mistress, the eyes began to say, casting its glance to look affectionately at the young lady in the spirit spring, before turning towards the little snake. I hope that you do not drag down the mistress. If not for you, the mistress cultivation could not possibly remain in such a rut and not progress. You should know it yourself. With her capabilities and gift, all these lands here would not be able to hold her back at all. An accompanying weapon spirit for life, fates bound together for good or for ill. Qingyu cultivation had been increasing every day and making good progress, but a portion of her energy essence was given to the weapon spirit, in order for it to restore its incomplete spirit body. Otherwise, with the kind of gift she possessed as the top-ranked and most highly skilled person within the reclusive hidden family clan, she should be already making a name for herself in the highest level lands by now. The little snake's gold and silver long-slitted eyes rippled inside, and it was quite a while later before it said with a heavy voice, "The fact that you appeared today must mean that you know of a way to restore my spirit body. Hey, you're not that dumb." The eyes then did not open its mouth to humiliate the little snake anymore. You just stay right here. I came across a powerful human spirit body before, and he was just recently deceased. That spirit body is very powerful, and I can sense that it is roaming around nearby. When I capture it and bring it here, you can then take the opportunity to devour it. The little snake's expression was a little hesitant. Human spirit. But always with the buts. The burial soul arts itself is evil and dark, and you are a dark artifact. It's only because your mistress is of the purest bloodline that you are not overtaken by darkness. Anyway, devouring a human spirit is not all that big a matter. The pair of eyes was already about to go out upon saying all that when the little snake felt a sense of familiarity in his heart. Suddenly remembering something, the little snake's eyes then widened in stare. Could you possibly be? Tisk, you've only come to realize who I am now? You really are getting more and more useless. The little snake saw those arrogant eyes snort derisively, and then disappeared from its sight, and things finally dawned upon its little mind. But seeing that the pair of eyes was actually doing something to help it, the little snake then decided to not be so calculative with that fella who did not even possess a body. The sky outside gradually turned a color like the underbelly of a fish. After a night's nourishing soak in the spirit spring, Qing Yu's wounds had healed very quickly. Additionally, she had also gained enlightenment at the same time, where the burial soul art's 4th level that she had been stuck at all this time had been broken through last night, to advance into the 5th level. The burial soul arts had a total of 10 levels, and every level was split into 5 small stages. After the first 5 levels, every small stage's advancement would bring the cultivator into a new realm of power. When cultivated to its pinnacle, one would be able to smash through the void and enter into the realm of immortals. That would be when one would be a wielder of true power, summoning the clouds with a lift of the hand, and bringing rain with a flip of the palm. Qing Yu in her previous life had attained the 8th level, and had never encountered one who could oppose her, which made her extremely lonely. In this life, she yearned very strongly to become strong as well. As Qing Yu gradually came awake, she saw that the sky had turned very bright, and a hazy reddish-golden light seemed to have flashed past her eyes. She had been soaked in the spirit spiring the entire night and did not feel anything abnormal in her body. It was only when she sat up that she discovered her clothes had been changed. Her brain then froze for an instant. Her clothes. Who changed her? Was it Lu Junyao? Immediately, the flawlessly beautiful face flashed with slivers of shame and anger. A creak sounded as the door was pushed open, and a woman wearing a goose-yellow long dress, her face half covered by a light veil, came walking in. Chapter 29. 3. Strange Eyes. Qing Yu was surprised for a moment. She had not seen this lady before throughout the many times she had been here, but her demeanor and flair was rather similar to that of Lien Ji's. I am Yu Ji, the woman said, her head lifting up slightly. Yu Ji? Qing Yu arched up an eyebrow. And both you and Lien Ji are assassins? Or why would they have such similar names? Yu Ji then answered respectfully, I am one of the Lord's shadow guards, and my duty is to protect the Lord. I see. Qing Yu nodded her head in understanding, and then got up from the bed. She was just about to go outside when she turned her head back, seemingly having just thought of something. Last night, who changed my clothes for me? Yu Ji was taken aback by the question. I did. In the next second, she saw that person's face that had looked rather tense break into a smile. That's great. Thank you. And the young lady then went out with light and quick steps. Yu Ji's face was one of bewilderment. What is she getting so happy about? Lu Junyao was just coming in when he saw that tall and slender figure nimbly leaping out over the high walls of the gathered cloud loft. That lass really has the personality of a wild and untamed kitten. My lord. Yu Ji came walking over. When she saw the faint smile at the edges of the man's lips, she was rather surprised. Lu Junyao then turned his gaze back. When she left, did she say anything? Yu Ji shook her head, and then said while feeling a little puzzled. She merely asked who was the person that changed her clothes. Oh. Lu Junyao raised an eyebrow. I told her that I was the one who changed it for her, and she said great. After that, she seemed to be rather happy about it. Yu Ji related everything that had happened to her lord truthfully. I do not know what she was feeling so happy about. Hearing that, Lu Junyao's smile widened, and his violet eyes sparkled, looking unusually captivating. Does the little one think that the fact that she is a girl has not been exposed? How foolish. Yu Ji then watched her lord walking away, his face looking rather amused. The lord? And that young lady? Something's not right. Although she could not put her finger on just what exactly was wrong. Eternal Peace Duke's manor, Yinning Luo, who had stayed away from home for the past few days, finally decided to go back in the end. After all, that was her biological brother, and siblings would not bear grudges. Hence, she was prepared to go back and speak with her brother about it properly, as long as he did not insist on antagonizing their mother because of that pair of twin siblings. But she had just reached the door when she saw a nondescript but luxurious horse carriage parked outside. Yin Ning Luo had never seen this horse carriage before, and she guessed there was a guest inside. But she probably would never have guessed who the guest was. "Little Ning, you've come back. Why aren't you coming in?" Yin Shicheng was entertaining the guest in the main hall, and he saw his sister that he had not seen for the past few days at the door the moment he raised his head. Yin Ning Luo was dressed in a smoky green chiffon dress, a magical air around her, her demeanor extraordinarily cold, her clear eyes looking indifferently upon the man inside the hall. The Crown Prince Xinyuan Che, the last person that Yin Ning Luo would want to see. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. "You, Little Ning, aren't you going to come greet the Crown Prince's Highness?" When Yin Shicheng saw that she was not moving, he thought that as a girl, she was being bashful and coy, and he went up to pull her inside. Xinyuan Che arched up an eyebrow and looked at the icy expression on Yin Ning Luo's face. "TSK, it just irks me no matter which way I look at her. Those people out there must all be blind. How can they call a woman like this the greatest beauty? Your Highness, you seem to be rather free recently," Yin Ning Luo said, putting on an insincere mouth. "I can't possibly be more free than the princess yourself, as this crown prince is the future ruler and I cannot afford to slack off at all in my cultivation or court matters." Xinyuan Che's voice was gentle, and the words spoken seemed quite harmless, but were filled with veiled ridicule. Chapter 30. 1. Liking me is a condition, needs to be treated. Is that right? Makes me wonder what matter could possibly make the Crown Prince take his precious time out of his busy schedule to come to the Eternal Peace Duke's manor today. Nothing important, but just dropping in for a visit as I was passing by. Then you should go now. Your Highness must still have many things to deal with, and we won't ask you to stay for a meal. Coincidentally, this Crown Prince is feeling a little hungry. Our plain and crude fare is beneath your Highness' palate. It's all right. This Crown Prince does not mind. Yin Shicheng was at a loss. This awkward atmosphere was impossible to salvage. It was such a strange sight to see the two of them flinging barbed words back and forth. Despite having seen this happen for so many years in the past, he still could not get used to the way the two of them interacted with each other. But very soon, this awkward atmosphere was quickly shattered. Looking over to the person slumped back in his chair and laughing hysterically, unable to hold it in as tears streamed down his face, one would know why. "Bwahahaha hey, don't look at me. You guys should just continue. It's just too funny. Ow. My stomach." "Ha ha ha." Xinyuan Che continued to stare at him. Yin Ning Luo creased up her brows. "Mu Qi, what are you laughing at?" Yin Ning Luo and Mu Qi could be considered to be on rather familiar terms, as the Faint Mist sect and the Limitless sect were on good terms and enjoyed a good relationship. They had even conducted an exchange of their disciples to each other's sects for more learning. In the period that Yin Ning Luo had gone to the Limitless sect, she had received instruction from the same master as Mu Qi. Mu Qi had his arms clasped over his stomach, and it was only after a huge struggle that he managed to hold in his laughter. "I'll say, aren't the two of you engaged to each other? Why is the relationship between the two of you so toxic? I almost died laughing, you know. If one did not know, they would surely think the two of you are arch-enemies." Yin Ning Luo sneered. "We are arch-enemies. I just cannot seem to comprehend as well why my father would choose a woman like this to be my wife," Xinyuan Che said helplessly. "Huh. Xinyuan Che, say that one more time. What do you mean by a woman like this?" Yin Ning Luo's eyes flared wide. With that, she could not even be bothered to hypocritically address him as His Highness anymore. "Are you looking to pick a fight?" "I'm sorry, I will never strike a woman," Xinyuan Che said as his lips curled up slightly, looking every inch a graceful gentleman. "Huh. 3 months later. I'll see you up on the arena." Yin Ning Luo issued the challenge without any hesitation. Yin Shicheng saw that the atmosphere was becoming worse and worse, and he hurriedly put on a smile to try to smooth things over. All right. Don't be like this. We're just be making a joke out of ourselves in front of everyone. Little Ning, regardless of everything else, His Highness the Crown Prince is still your betrothed, and do you know how many ladies out there are just so envious of you? That is because none of them know that this fella is not what he shows himself to be, a beast wearing the face of a human, Yin Ning Luo said as she shot him a glare, before spinning herself right around and went walking out without glancing back, leaving Yin Shicheng there to apologize profusely with an awkward expression on his face. Little Ning has been spoilt rotten. I beg for your highness the crown prince's forgiveness. Mu Chun still went up to ask with his face inquisitive. Big brother, why am I not aware that you're a beast wearing a human face? What kind of a beastly thing have you done to that poor girl? When Xinyuan Che saw that gloating face of his, Xinyuan Che immediately raised a hand to rap Mu Chi on the head angrily. Beast your big head. A corner of Mu Chi's mouth twitched. Great. Big brother has gotten angry for once. It's better not make things any worse. Just let him stew in his anger himself. That's right. He came here today because of something important. He had gone back and thought it over for a whole night and decided to come find that young lady, to confess his heart to her. The moment he closed his eyes he had seen that pair of keen eyes of hers, and that irresistible smile. Till this age, Mu Chi had never kept thinking of someone day and night like this before. He surmised that he must have been poisoned. Poisoned by that young lady named Su Yin. Taking the opportunity of the gap in the conversation between Yin Shicheng and Xinyuan Che, Mu Chi made up an excuse and then slipped himself out. Chapter 30. 2. Liking me is a condition, needs to be treated. Hence, when Qingyu returned, she was met with this scene. Her younger brother was seated in the room and chatting amicably with a very familiar-looking man, seeming like they had a lot of common topics. She could not help but raise an eyebrow. Has little Bei brought a friend home? Sis, you're back. When Qing Bei saw that she had come back, he got up and went forward to welcome her. Your friend came here to look for you, and has already waited for quite a while. My friend? Qingyu raised her eyes to look, and saw the person flashing an incredibly brilliant smile at her. Qingyu was at a loss for words. Just like a ghost that can't be shaken off. Mu Chi acted as if he had not noticed the face she was making. Miss Su Yin, we meet again. Qing Bei was puzzled. Miss Su Yin? Qingyu saw the flabbergasted face on her brother, and she stroked his head gently, indicating for him to go inside. Qing Bei had always obeyed her, and he nodded his head before he pushed his wheelchair into the other room at the back himself. Qingyu then sat down and poured out cups of tea for herself, and Mu Chi, young Master Mu. Call me Mu Chi, or even Ah Chi will do as well. Qingyu felt her temples twitch. We've only met twice. It wouldn't be nice to address you like that. Isn't this fella being too familiar here? Hearing that, Mu Chi's expression turned serious. Who said we've only met twice? It's not. Qingyu knitted up her brows. If she had met him before, she should have an impression of him at least. It's already the third time including this time, Mu Chi said with a stern face. Qingyu was speechless. Miss Su Yin, I came here this time because there is an important matter that I would like to ask for you help with. Mu Chi finally brought up the real purpose of his visit, and it was guessed that it was something quite serious as his demeanor had turned grave. Qingyu took a sip of her tea to moisten her throat. What is this matter about? I know that you are an alchemist and possess good medical skills as well. Mu Chi began by saying. What about it? Qingyu arched up an eyebrow, guessing that he wants her to help him save someone, or for her to concoct some kind of medicine or something. Mu Chi gave a long sigh, and then turned his eyes mournfully to Qingyu to say, I might have contracted an illness. You? Qingyu cast a doubtful glance at his face appraisingly. His complexion was rosy, and he seemed to be filled with vigor. He did not look like he was sick. Mu Chi saw her casting a suspicious glance at him, and he summoned up his courage to suddenly grab her hand, drawing it in to place it upon his chest. See? Isn't my heart beating exceptionally fast? Qingyu was startled by his sudden action of grabbing her hand to his chest, and upon hearing his words, it seemed that the rate his heart was beating it was rather abnormal at that. Could he really have contracted some illness that she had never encountered before? Ever since that day I went back from here, you have frequently appeared in my dreams. Your smile, your voice, all the words you've said, I remember them all so clearly. Can you tell me what is going on? Qingyu was stunned into a daze. Wait, wait. Let her recollect herself a moment. Was this bloke making a confession? In the very next second, her guess was immediately verified. Miss Su Yin, I know that I might come across as a little too brusque by saying this suddenly, but if I do not tell it to you, and do not let you know, it is really just too tormenting to keep it in my heart. This is my first time liking a lady, and I do not know how I should say this. Cat hunk. From inside, it sounded like a wheelchair had fallen heavily to the ground. Qingbei had been paying attention to the situation outside, but did not dare to be too obvious with his eavesdropping, so he had tried to be sneaky about it. But suddenly hearing such an explosive piece of news, he found that he really could not digest it. Chapter 33. Liking me is a condition, needs to be treated. Having fallen with a crash to the ground, his first reaction was not whether he was hurt anywhere, but was thinking whether his sister was being confessed to by a suitor who had chased her all the way right up to their door. When had she come to attract this love interest? The two of them were often together, and the few times they were apart were only when they went into seclusion for cultivation, not seeing each other for just a few days. How could something like this happen when he knew nothing about it at all? It was really just too incomprehensible no matter how much he thought about it. With such a loud commotion, one would have to be deaf to not hear it. Having one's own little brother overhear such a thing, how much more embarrassing could anything be? Qingyu gave a helpless smile, and the lad in front of her was still staring at her with a highly earnest look. Man, you've really caught the disease quite badly. It needs to be treated. Mu Qi blinked his eyes innocently. Do you have a cure? Of course I do. Qingyu nodded. Come over here once again tonight, and your illness will be cured. Tonight? When night was mentioned, it was not known what kind of a scenario Mu Qi's mind had immediately drifted off to, as two plumes of pink quickly climbed onto his cheeks. This scoundrel, what kind of filthy things are you thinking about? All right, then I'll take my leave for now. His heart beginning to beat and thump wildly once again, Mu Qi did not dare to remain there any longer, but quickly got up to leave bashfully before his ears burned up as well. Qingyu's smile then faded away, and her eyes quickly darkened. You rascal! Get yourself out here this instant. Qingbei coughed dryly a few times, and then stuck half his body out from the room at the back. Heh, about that, sis? You liked what you heard? Qingyu shot him a sideways glance. Not at all, not even a little bit. Qingbei rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Who was that man? The fool who sent the gold. Qingyu said in a huffy tone. You conned him of so much money and he could still come to fall in love with you. He really isn't your typical kind of guy. Qingbei's face was one of admiration, which then turned into one of worry as he said, Will he cause us any trouble? If he starts to come here often. Rest assured about that. Qingyu's face split into a wide smile, exposing her brilliant white teeth. I will make sure he does not dare to come here any more tonight. Night fell, and Mu Qi came as they had agreed. The moon hung high up in the night sky, a beautiful night. What a great night, most suited to sit among flowers under the sky. Mu Qi came to the tranquil abode, and discovered that all was silent in there. It was pitch dark in the tranquil abode, and no a single light was lit. Mu Qi was a little puzzled. Could she have fallen asleep? That shouldn't be possible. She had told him to come here tonight. Crunch, crunch, a sound that made his skin crawl reached his ears. It sounded like some wild beast was gnawing on its food. Mu Qi's heart froze, and he lightened his footsteps on tiptoes to move towards the source of the sound. He parted a clump of dense herbs with his hands, and the sound of the gnawing grew louder, accompanied by the sound of a human voice. MMM. Tastes great. It's really good. Crunch, crunch. Chomp, chomp. A short distance away from him was a human figure who had his back facing him, crouched down over there, his actions seemingly tearing wildly at something, the scene feeling a little garish. He stared to get a better look, and saw that it was actually the thick arm of a man, and it was all covered in splatters of blood. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Mu Qi gasped a large breath of air, and his eyes widened. That person turned his head and his mouth split into a wide grin, his mouth and lips all covered in red gory blood. Do you want some? Seeing that person's flawless and alluring countenance, who else could that person be but Qingyu? But the expression on her face at that moment looked exceptionally sinister and horrifying, like an evil demon. Mu Qi's subconscious made him turn himself around and leave immediately, where he even summoned up his powers to leap high up into the air. Chapter 31. 1. Ninth Princess Xianyan. That was really what people would call true blazing speed. Qingyu wiped off the pale white fluorescent powder off her face, and with a light wave of her fingers, the thick human arm immediately changed greatly. She brought it up to her mouth and chomped a bite off the delicious and refreshing, highly juicy Buddha's hand fruit. What a timid little fella. But, she would be left alone now. Thinking about that, she smiled. Under the moonlight, that pretty little face showed a rare moment of innocence and looked so adorable. Yawn. Qingyu gave a great yawn. Back to sleep. She usually followed a rather regular pattern when it came to resting, and she was rather late tonight. She went into her room and closed the door, the outside a swathe of silence once again. Water Edge Kingdom. Around the sides of a large rounded arena stage were many young men and women, their faces filled with restrained excitement and adoration. Go, 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 Ninth Princess. Sweet heavens. The Ninth Princess should be only 16 this year, I think, and compared to just a month ago, her cultivation seems to have advanced again. She's our Water Edge Kingdom's most talented young lady indeed. Bam! A figure slammed heavily into the guardrails around the edge of the arena and vomited out a large mouthful of blood. I've lost. It was a man that was over 20 years old, his clothes highly ragged, the expression on his face dejected. His eyes remained lowered as an exquisitely made pair of white ankle boots came to a stop before him. He was startled a moment as he lifted his head, and seeing that lovely and beautiful countenance so close to him, it caused the man's face that was in a slightly wretched state unconsciously start to turn red. A lake blue flowy long dress, with a thin strapped white patterned bustier inside, bundled around a tiny slender waist. With her back bent right in front of him, that almost discernible cleavage was impossibly alluring, her figure causing the man to stare straight at her, unable to take his eyes off. Her head of luxurious black hair draped over her shoulders, with wisps of the hair beside her temples a light lake blue, and she had a pair of large eyes that were full of life, their irises blue as well, inherited from her maternal side, a symbol of one who was of legitimate bloodline, that was rare to see even in 100 years. Her skin was snowy white, seemingly almost ephemerally beautiful, looking highly quick-witted and intelligent, a rare beauty with pressing spiritual aura. Not too bad. This time, you've managed to last through the period of one joss stick's time. You've improved. Yu Xianyan said smilingly, her eyes two crescents as she pointed at the incense thurible placed up on the high platform, to see that the joss stick had just burned out. The man was taken aback a moment, seemingly not having ever thought that he would be able to last past that one joss stick's time. Yu Xianyan was not bothered by his raggedness as she patted him on his shoulder. Practice your cultivation well. When the day comes that you are able to last through 3 joss sticks time at my hands, I will plead with my royal brother to have you released. The man's expression turned to shock. Why are you helping me? Because you are different from the others, Yu Xianyan said as she raised her eyes to gaze indifferently towards a sharp-roofed building. Locked up in there were all intruders who had attempted to barge their way into the mysterious Water Edge Kingdom. The man looked at her in surprise. Oh, you want to ask me how I know that? Yu Xianyan smiled. When you become stronger, you might even be able to gaze upon that man whom you worship at close distance. This man had intruded into the Water Edge Kingdom, not to delve into the amazing magic in here or to seek the endless riches they possessed, but only because of the god of slaughter that everyone throughout the lands was terrified of, the Duke of Vast Seas. He had been imprisoned in here for more than 2 months, and had only seen the man in the legends once, from a far distance away. And it was that one time, when his eyes were filled with undisguised fervor and worship that made Yu Yin look at him differently. The man had great foresight and vision, and she was able to help him. Chapter 31. 2. Ninth Princess Yin. Thank you, Ninth Princess. I will definitely become stronger. I want to throw myself under the banner of the Duke of Vast Seas. The man clasped his hand around his fist, bowing respectfully before the princess. Yu Yin began chuckling upon hearing that. That will not be an easy task. Big brother Yili has an eccentric temperament, and he completely ignores people he does not find pleasing to the eye. When the man heard that, he was just about to say something when he saw the expression of the young lady before him light up with joy and then leapt out of the arena with a light tap of her foot. The crowd surrounding the arena also quickly dispersed, surging to gather towards another direction. It was as if they were all led over there, and the man unconsciously turned his gaze over in that direction as well. Not too far away, a man stood, a tall and slender figure, wearing a deep red long robe that hid a well-built physique. His silver hip long hair bound up with a jade crown of the same color, looking exceptionally mesmerizing and bewitching. The Duke of Vast Seas possessed an exceptional physical constitution, and as his looks were rather different from the others, which might have caused him to not like to meet with people. Hence, he always wore a wolf-shaped mask over his face all the time, and only that strange pair of green eyes could be seen, and a pair of thin lips that were not prone to smiles, a man of few words. Despite that, all of that could not stop the Water Edge Kingdom's subjects' adoring and worshipping hearts. At that moment, a pretty young lady dressed in blue stood in front of him, her head lifted up to smile sweetly at him. Big brother Yili, you've slept for such a long time. Do you still remember your way around the palace? Are you going to see my royal brother? I can lead the way for you. Qing Yili quietly gazed at the young lady who was smiling prettily like a flower in front of him, and he was actually flustered for an instant. That girl's smile was still so clear in his memories, so warm, mischievous, a little naughty, every single one of them so lively and witty. He still remembered. She loved to smile. Her smiles were so beautiful. Is this Yin? You've grown up? Qing Yili's lips parted, his voice cold and magnetic, melodious and highly enchanting. Big brother Yili can still remember me. That is really great. Yu Yin was extremely happy about that. Qing Yili swept his eyes over the fighting arena to look, and then lowered his eyes to ask, why have you developed an interest with those intruders? If you really that bored, why not go out for a bout of rigorous training? Yu Yin's tiny mouth pouted, and see the man raise his foot to walk away. She quickly moved to catch up. Big brother Yili, aren't we both already going to the Green Wave Kingdom already? I heard that there are many powerful figures there. I will just go challenge them when we get there. In the current Green Wave Kingdom's imperial family, with the exception of their crown prince, all the other are either still too young, or they have amounted to nothing. There is nothing about them that we need to fear. The young man following right behind Qing Yili said with a laugh. Ninth Princess, the Green Wave Kingdom's Princess Ningfeng, who is about on equal standing with you, might however be worth a match. Jin, is that Yinning Luo really that skilled? More highly skilled than me? Yu Yin then asked with an eyebrow arched up. Jin thought about it for a moment. About that, without having competed before, your subordinate does not dare to make any audacious conclusion. But Princess Ningfeng does indeed possess quite a good amount of power, and she is also a prodigious young lady just like our princess here. Is that so? Then I will really like to look into that myself. Yu Yin nodded, her heart growing with a tinge of curiosity towards this young lady she had yet to have met. Jin watched the look on her face and then said with a laugh, it's funny when I tell you this. Princess Ningfeng and the Crown Prince Xinyuan Che have been engaged in marriage back from when they were very young, and it was initially planned that they would marry after her coming-of-age ceremony when she turned 16. But a good half-year has already passed from then, and there hasn't been even a squeak from either of them. And why is that? Yu Yin asked in puzzlement. Haha, I heard that the two of them had not been able to see eye to eye with anything from young, and every time they meet, they are always at each other's throats like mortal enemies. Chapter 31. 3. Ninth Princess Yin. Yu Yin laughed, Her eyes turned to slits with smile. Something so funny can really happen? She continued chatting with Ajin outside about this, and that while Qing Yili went into the imperial study. Every time I come, I see you buried in a pile of memorials. Yumu Chen raised his head and saw the man coming in. He then stood up from his chair. You're here. Sit. Hearing that, Qing Yili sat on a chair at the side. Yumu Chan poured out a cup of tea for the man, and his gaze measured the man up. You've become stronger indeed. Compared to 7 years ago, I am unable to get a grasp of your aura at all now. If not for your ill health which makes your body unable to withstand the pressure, you will not be doing any worse, Qing Yili said indifferently. Yumu Chan was, among all the people he had met, the man whose mind was the most resolute and surpassing intelligence. The Water Edge Kingdom's ruler was a weak-bodied walking medicine bottle who did not possess a high level of cultivation, but no one dared to slight him in any way. His brain was one that no normal persons could ever compare to, and if he had the ambition, ruling over the entire lands would just be a matter of time. But alas, his heart was at peace and content with his life, and from young, he had never held any especially deep yearning towards any particular matter or person, where even when he assumed the crown, it was just a matter of acceding to the people's wishes. All this while, he had been too tired. I only wish to be able to do something more for Water Edge while I am still alive. Yumu Chan smiled gently, and then went on to say a little regretfully, but with this tattered body I have, I do not know how many more years I will be able to last, and whether I will even be able to leave behind an heir is a tough task. Although his imperial harem was not filled with thousands of beauties like was the norm, but there was still quite a number of imperial concubines. It was just that he had never gone to their chambers before. He knew his own situation very well, and he did not want to give those women hope and for it to finally turn to disappointment. Qing Yi Li's eyes darkened. If Xian Yen is to hear that, she will be sad. That is why I have never said it in front of her. That last might seem heartlessly callous, but she cares for me the most. Yumu Chun could hear the young lady's joyous voice outside, and his face was filled with doting indulgence. Don't be so pessimistic. Qing Yili's expression under his mask seemed to change, and the man who never showed any emotion on his face then parted his lips slightly to say, I am looking for a person. If I can find her, then you will definitely be able to regain the health of your body. Yumu Chon was stunned for a moment. What did you say? For his body, a countless number of famed alchemists across the lands have all almost deemed it to be condemned, and could only use elixirs to keep him hanging, with no way of curing him completely. A weak and sickly body carried out from a mother's womb was hard to treat. But what has he just heard? His body can be saved? Yumu Chun could almost not believe what he had just heard. Yili, is what you said really true? My body really can be cured? Qing Yili nodded. That person's skills in medicine is very good, and the alchemists throughout the lands are not even 1/10 as good. Yumu Chun was rather surprised. Yili seldom had such high praise for anyone, and a guess seemed to form up in his heart. Could that person possibly be from the same world you were from?
Yes.
When Qing Yili thought of that person, his green eyes softened. He knew that that girl was still alive, and no matter where she was, the day would come where he would find her. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He had so many words he had not been able to say in time to her, and he wanted to tell them all to her. In the past, he had not dared to say them. But after having been separated by death before, he thought that he should let her know that he had always cared for only one person. Only for her. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.